Chapter 1, The Dual World Slytherin 1. August 1991. Ottery St. Catchpole, Devon, England. North of the village stood a lush green hill. Atop it sat an old-fashioned manor, its lawn meticulously trimmed. Sunlight painted the plane trees by the wall in burnished gold. A long-eared owl flew in from afar, its talons clutching a brown envelope. After 2 circles in the air, it alighted on the sill beside the plane tree. Tap tap. The owl rapped the glass with its beak. The window opened to reveal a black-haired boy with natural curls. Handsome and neatly dressed, he made an instantly likable impression. He took the letter-heavy parchment sealed with wax bearing the Weasley crest. "You flew over 2 hills just for this." Damien stroked the owl's head and offered it a dried fish. Damien's home was actually close to the burrow, both properties lay near Ottery St. Catchpole. Just then, a black cat crept forward on its belly. As it neared the owl, it sprang, pouncing in a flash. Startled, the owl flapped to escape. However, the cat was yanked backward in mid-air toward Damien, who caught it one-handed and tucked it under his arm. Had this been Charms class, Professor Flitwick would have awarded 10 points for Damien's wordless summoning charm. "Don't be rude, we have a guest, Knox." Damien smoothed the cat's fur. Knox was a black cat with Neasel blood. He possessed an intelligence rivaling that of a human child. "Murrow." Knox nuzzled Damien, his tail flicking in protest, his blue eyes never leaving the owl. While Damien read, Knox lay across his lap, staring the owl down. Damien Black was 14 and a Slytherin at Hogwarts. He was home for the summer break, about to start his 3rd year come September. He was a transmigrator. An accident in his past life had sent him to this world with his memories intact. Sadly, he'd never read the books, he had only watched some of the films. His previous life had been unremarkable. In this world, however, his magical talent was superb, his spell-casting already surpassed that of many adult wizards. "Goodbye, Hermes," he said, handing the reply to the owl, which took off in haste. Hermes was Percy Weasley's owl, a reward for becoming a prefect. Fred and George, green with envy, had spent the entire holiday inventing excuses to borrow Hermes from Percy. With Hermes gone, Damien checked the time and returned to clearing the storeroom. He brewed potions often and needed space for a proper laboratory. Most of the work was done, only the finishing touches remained. "Knox, you're turning into a dust ball." Damien sighed at the ash-covered cat. Cats were naturally curious, forever squeezing into dusty corners. Damien tapped the cat with his wand, casting a quick scouring charm. The grime vanished instantly. "What did you find?" "Let me see." He had spotted something in the cat's mouth. He extracted a ring-shaped metal disc, scarred by time. Its rim was set with a flawless, polygonal red crystal. A thread of magic pulsed within the disc, barely perceptible. Had Damien's senses been ordinary, he might have missed it entirely. "What is this?" he wondered. He had never seen the disc before. The locked storeroom held only heirlooms from his parents and grandparents. Suddenly, the crystal glowed a faint red. Damien's expression shifted. The disc was draining his magic, and fast. He tried to cut the flow of magic at once. Yet, even without his input, the crystal only blazed brighter. He tried to hurl it outside, but the disc clung to him like a sticking charm, fixed to his palm. Crimson light swallowed his vision. He found himself paralyzed, his body squeezed as if being forced through a narrow rubber tube, sinking rapidly. The weightlessness of a falling elevator washed over him, and every sound receded. The world stretched into ghost images, followed by a violent vertigo. When it finally faded, he found himself surrounded by an endless expanse of white, snow-laden trees and a sharp wind driving powdery flakes. The bone-deep cold made him shiver. Each breath felt like it was freezing his lungs solid. Damien's face darkened. The disc had flung him to an entirely unknown place. A port Kayat? No, the disc is gone. A one-way transfer. He frowned, his expression grim. His left hand was empty. The metal disc had vanished completely unnoticed. Luckily, he had been holding his wand while clearing the room. It had come with him. He waved the wand, transfiguring his neat shirt and waistcoat into a thick traveling cloak, transforming the inner layers into warm wool. Suddenly, the strange, umbrella-shaped trees around him lurched to life. Arm-thick branches whipped violently toward him. Damien raised his wand. A sharp whistle sliced the air as a severing charm diffindo cut through several limbs, leaving them writhing on the ground. Before he could even catch his breath, more branches snaked inward, weaving a serpent's nest around him. Incendio! He lifted his wand high. Jets of roaring flame burst from the tip, beating the branches back. He spun his wand, using the severed wood as fuel to feed the blaze. A ring of fire walled him off, the burning limbs lashing out like 1,000 fiery serpents. He thrust the wand forward. The surging flames punched a clear path through the blazing vines. Dumbledore's fire path scene was a famous movie moment from his past life. Damien had watched the clips, the image forever etched into his memory. Damien's version merely combined incendio with basic flame manipulation. It was far weaker. Had Dumbledore cast it, the aggressive plants would already be ash. Besides, he could only manage common fire, not something as devastatingly powerful as fiend fire. With the burning branches momentarily scattered, he sprinted onto a nearby mountain path. He raced downhill before the plants could recover. Bitter wind and driving snow cut his visibility to near zero. The narrow trail offered no room for error. A single misstep meant plunging into the valley below. Once clear of the grove, he gasped. The icy air stabbed at his throat like needles. Glancing back, he saw a colossal ancient tree resting on the peak, its limbs arching into a perfect umbrella-like crown. Closer inspection revealed knotted growths along the branches. They looked like giant, tumor-ridden serpents writhing against the stormy sky. A magical plant? A species I've never even seen? Worry flickered in his eyes. This place was incredibly dangerous. He checked his pockets, 2 chocolate bars. The sudden transfer meant he had left his bag with the undetectable extension charm behind. He had to find human habitation fast, as food would be scarce out here. Suddenly, he froze. A stream of foreign information surged directly into his mind. 75 stones, unlock 1 bonus chapter. 150 stones, unlock 2 bonus chapters. 300 stones, unlock 3 bonus chapters. Chapter 2, The Dual World Slytherin 2. Damien focused his mind, inspecting the strange sensation within his head. An image of the ring-shaped metal disc appeared in his mind's eye. He really was in another world. The disc, it seemed, was the key to crossing the boundary between dimensions. The red crystal set into the disc acted as a reservoir, consuming its stored energy to facilitate the crossing. It recharged automatically, but a full charge would take 7 days. A round-trip ticket, Damien thought, exhaling a long breath of relief as he digested the information the artifact fed him. Having already transmigrated once over a decade ago, he was somewhat used to the shock. Fortunately, this time he actually had a way back. 7 days until I can go home. He could sense the dim, depleted state of the crystal. It's already dark. I need to find shelter first and explore tomorrow. Damien sighed, knowing that surviving a week in this frozen wasteland would be no easy feat. A woof of faint wolf howls drifted from the path ahead. A wolf pack? Damien grew alert. He flicked his wand, casting a disillusionment charm to blend seamlessly into his surroundings. He pressed forward for a few minutes as the howls grew nearer. Sounds like something else is out there, too. Moments later, Damien spotted a pale blue glow racing through the driving snow. He quickly surveyed his surroundings, climbed a thick tree, and watched from his concealed vantage point. The blue light rapidly approached. He saw a snow-white stag, massive as a draft horse, pulling a sled. Its antlers shone like magical beacons through the dark forest. Driving the sled was a broad-shouldered, red-haired man with deep-set eyes. His face was frantic as he urged the great stag to run faster. When the sled was a mere 20 meters from Damien's tree, its right runner clipped a hidden stump. The wooden shafts and leather reins snapped, sending the speeding sled overturning into the snow. "Damn it!" the red-haired man cursed, shoving away the heavy planks that had pinned him. Crawling toward the wrecked canopy, he shouted in alarm, "Tina! Are you hurt?" A little red-haired girl scrambled from the debris. "Papa, Tina's all right." She looked no older than 8. The fall had clearly hurt, and tears glimmered in her eyes, but she stubbornly refused to cry. To Damien's shock, they were speaking a dialect that sounded exactly like spoken ancient runes. Before they could regroup, more than a dozen huge wolves surrounded them. The beasts were larger than calves, with grey-blue fur, glowing red eyes, and fangs as thick as a man's fingers. "Those wolves are massive. I have no idea how strong they actually are," Damien thought, staying hidden in the branches. The pack lunged. The man's expression hardened. He drew the long sword at his waist and slashed at a wolf leaping toward the little girl. The blade flashed with a strange cyan light. Half the wolf's head flew off, and the carcass thudded into the snow, twitching once before going still. Before the man could shift his stance, agony shot through his left arm. A second wolf had sunk its teeth into his forearm, pinning him as others moved to pounce. At the same instant, Tina screamed. Another wolf had circled around the wreckage and was closing in on her. Hearing his daughter's cry, the man burned with desperation. "Get off!" he roared. The cyan light flashed again, and the wolf clamped to his arm lost its head. But the rear wolf had already knocked Tina down, baring its massive fangs for the killing bite. "Tina!" the man bellowed, his eyes wide with anguish. He tried desperately to reach her, but the remaining wolves swarmed, pinning him to the ground. Trapped beneath the beast, the terrified girl snatched a jagged plank from the wreckage and bravely jammed it into the wolf's jaws. The wood only delayed the inevitable, cracks raced across its surface as the jaws clamped down. Suddenly, the plank in the wolf's mouth transfigured into a razor-sharp steel blade. It drove straight through the beast's palate and pierced its brain. Tina stared in shock as the heavy beast collapsed beside her. Around the clearing, the scattered sled wreckage instantly morphed into wrist-thick, iron-hard vines that whipped out and bound the remaining wolves fast. The trapped beasts thrashed violently, but the magical vines only tightened. With another flick of a wand, the vines transfigured into a flurry of spinning blades. The wolves were instantly sliced apart, their dark blood staining the pristine snow. Damien stepped out from the shadows. To a wizard of his caliber, these creatures were nothing but unusually strong animals. The father and daughter gaped. The pack that had nearly doomed them had been slaughtered in the blink of an eye. "Tina, are you hurt?" The man scrambled over and hugged her tight, his face a mix of self-reproach and immense relief. Tina buried her face in his chest. "Tina's fine, but Papa, you're bleeding." Damien walked over, dropping the disillusionment charm. With a casual wave of his wand, he untransfigured the bloody metal blades back into harmless wooden debris. Startled by the boy's sudden appearance out of thin air, the red-haired man quickly knelt in the snow, shielding the shaken Tina. "Thank you, wizard, for saving my daughter," he said, bowing his head. "I, Chris Watson, will remember your kindness forever." Tina's eyes were wide with wonder. She had never seen such a young, powerful wizard before. Damien nodded, a subtle blue light flickering in his eyes as he met Chris's gaze. "I am a reclusive wizard, new to these parts. Where is the nearest town?" "Whitestone Town is very close, my lord," Chris answered respectfully, still somewhat dazed. "I am the blacksmith of Gem Village. But our home is no longer safe." Chris gestured to the dead pack. "The animals in the nearby woods have grown savage and started attacking us. They looked just like these wolves' red eyes, swollen bodies. I was taking my daughter to Whitestone Town to seek refuge. The guards there will protect us. You are more than welcome to travel with us. Damien nodded thoughtfully. So, these wolves were an anomaly. He bent down to examine one of the carcasses and immediately sensed a wild, chaotic energy radiating from it, something entirely unlike wizarding magic. That violent energy was likely the very thing driving the local beasts mad. As Damien's fingers brushed the bloody fur, the metal disc in his mind shimmered. A wisp of red energy rose from the dead wolf and was instantly absorbed into his palm. Startled, he checked his internal connection to the artifact. The once dim red crystal was now glowing just a fraction brighter. The disc could absorb this alien energy to recharge itself. Without hesitation, he moved quickly from carcass to carcass, touching each one. With every touch, he felt the disc's stored energy rise. His mood lifted considerably. His return trip would come much sooner than he had thought. After draining all the bodies, he sensed the crystal was already over 1/3 charged. Meanwhile, Chris rummaged through the wreckage of his sled and pulled out a battered, leather-bound notebook. "Wizard, I have little to offer to thank you for saving us," Chris said, offering the book. "My ancestor was a wizard, and this is his journal. It records a spell. I pray it might be of some use to you." Chris clearly possessed no magical gift himself, but it seemed wizards were not a secret in this world. In his immense gratitude, he handed Damien the original family heirloom without hesitation. Damien raised an eyebrow at the unexpected loot. The goatskin cover was worn thin, but as he flipped it open, he saw the archaic text inside was still perfectly legible. He accepted the notebook with a polite nod and agreed to escort them the rest of the way to Whitestone Town. "Reparo," he cast, pointing his wand at the ruined sled. Like a film rewinding in time, the splintered wood and torn leather flew back together, seamlessly reassembling into its pre-crash state. Soon after, Chris returned leading the massive white stag by its harness. Luckily, the beast wasn't hurt, and it didn't run far. Damien just smiled faintly. The stag hadn't run far because he had immediately locked it in place with a silent Petrificus totalis the moment the fighting started. 75 stones, unlock 1 bonus chapter. 150 stones, unlock 2 bonus chapters. 300 stones, unlock 3 bonus chapters. Chapter 3, The Dual World Slytherin 3. The repaired sled glided smoothly over the snowy ground. "Brother Damien is so amazing." He restored the broken sled to its original state in an instant. The little girl excitedly traced the shape of the sled in the air with her small, mittened hands. Damien smiled gently. "When Tina turns 10, she will be able to go to the Northland United Wizard Academy to study." Throughout the journey, Damien had learned quite a bit from Chris about this new world. The Northland United Wizard Academy was jointly established by various wizarding factions in the region. Upon graduation, these factions would select their formal wizard apprentices from the student body. The academy recruited children around 10 years old who possessed magical aptitude, teaching them the absolute basics. It was the easiest, most accessible way for a commoner to come into contact with magic. Damien couldn't help but feel a pang of regret. He was already 14, meaning he had missed the enrollment age for the academy. To join a magical organization here, he would have to find another route. "Chris," Damien called out over the rushing wind. "Besides the academy, are there any other ways to join a wizarding organization in the Northland?" Chris kept his eyes on the trail but turned his head slightly to answer. "If you have a recommendation letter from a current member, you can apply directly. Alternatively, you can earn your place by passing the formal wizard examination." Formal wizards were relatively rare in this world. As long as a mage's personal philosophies aligned with an organization, they generally wouldn't be turned away if they proved their skill. Neither method would be easy. Damien was a total newcomer with no connections for a recommendation, and he hadn't even begun to study this world's unique magic system to pass their exams. "Are there any other paths besides those two?" Damien asked. Chris thought for a moment. Several kingdoms in the region recruit court wizards. My great-uncle actually served as a court wizard for the Blizzard Kingdom. Sadly, he passed away some time ago. He left behind a vacant residence in Whitestone Town, which is where we will be staying. Damien leaned forward. Are there strict requirements to become a court wizard? The threshold isn't terribly high, Chris explained. They recruit many unranked members to handle daily, mundane affairs. As long as you have the talent and aren't a dark wizard, you can join the court. However, becoming a formal member requires passing a rather difficult trial. Damien nodded in understanding. Court wizards were bogged down by worldly politics and kingdom administration, leaving them far less time for actual magical research. Still, Chris was an ordinary man without magic. His understanding of the system might be flawed or incomplete. Damien knew he would eventually need to find a real, local wizard to get the full picture. Suddenly, Damien's expression hardened. He noticed the surrounding mist growing unnaturally thick. The ambient forest noises had vanished, replaced by a suffocating silence. Through his magical perception, he could feel the mist practically vibrating with mana. As a newcomer, he initially wasn't sure if this was just a natural weather phenomenon of the winter forest. But as the fog thickened into a soupy white wall, the magic within it grew violently active. Suddenly, a sensation like 1,000 freezing ants crawled down Damien's spine. He whipped around. A lifeless face was hovering mere inches from his back. It was the deathly pale face of a corpse. It was completely hairless, its features twisted into an expression of profound sorrow. Its mouth hung slightly agape, dripping thick, black pus onto the sled. Its dead eyes stared unblinkingly at Damien. Damien didn't hesitate. With a flick of his wrist, his wand slid from his sleeve directly into his palm. Diffindo! A sharp whistle tore through the air as the severing charm's invisible blade slashed cleanly across the lifeless face. But there was no blood, and the creature wasn't shredded. Instead, its mouth stretched in an exaggerated, horrifying grin that reached its ears. More black pus spilled over its chin, yet its sorrowful eyes remained fixed. With an eerie, silent chuckle, the corpse face dissipated into the mist. Damien frowned, his wand still raised. An illusion. Chris had heard the sharp crack of the spell and turned back. Seeing the lingering black pus, he gasped. A phantom demon! A phantom demon! It's a magical creature that only exists deep within the winter forest. Why would one be out here? Chris cursed loudly, gripping the reins tight. Damn it, how did this road get so dangerous? It was perfectly safe just a few months ago. Crossing this mountain range led directly to the border of the winter forest. It was a desolate paradise for magical beasts, notoriously lethal to travelers. Theoretically, the winter forest was quarantined by a border of dragon serpent trees. Because those trees fed voraciously on magic, the beasts inside the forest generally couldn't escape past them. Dragon serpent trees. Damien immediately recalled the aggressive, writhing grove he had burned his way through upon arriving. Chris, how much do you know about these phantom demons? Damien asked, his eyes scanning the whiteout conditions. Not much. Chris shouted back. They're mostly local legends used to scare misbehaving children. But I once read my great-uncle's magical creature guide. It said they specialize in illusion magic, toying with their prey until they go mad. They can also shift their bodies into a spirit-like state, making physical attacks completely useless against them, Chris added grimly. A heavy silence fell over the sled. Through the thick mist, the vaguely visible treetops looked like towering monsters, baring their fangs and brandishing claws at the travelers. Tina had both hands clamped tightly over her mouth. She stared wide-eyed into the fog, terrified that making even a peep would summon the monsters from her bedtime stories. Salvio Hexia! Protego! Damien slashed his wand through the air, casting two layered protective enchantments. An invisible, shimmering dome expanded to shroud the moving sled. But Damien knew standard shield charms couldn't block a sustained, heavy assault without a continuous feed of his own magic. Right now, they served best as an early warning system. A second later, Damien sensed a ripple of magic strike the barrier from behind. He spun around, nothing was there. Revelio! A wave of revealing magic washed over the surroundings. Instantly, two deathly pale phantom demons materialized in the mist, floating just outside the magical barrier. Petrificus totalis. A bolt of blue light shot from Damien's wand, striking the nearest demon squarely in the chest. It passed right through the creature's ethereal body without leaving a scratch. Suddenly, a violent magical fluctuation erupted from inside the sled. Damien whipped his head around. Chris and Tina were gone. In their place, 4 horrifying phantom demons were lunging straight for him. More illusions. Damien's mind raced. The 4 demons were identical in size. Chris and Tina had to be mixed in among them, hidden by the creature's magic. He pointed his wand at the floorboards. The snow beneath the sled instantly transfigured into a surging pillar of ice, rocketing Damien upward and distancing him from the confined ambush. Looking down at the 4 identical monsters, he slashed his wand in a wide arc. Repello Muggletum. It was the Muggle repelling charm. The effect was instantaneous and outstanding. Because Chris and Tina possessed no magic, the charm affected them perfectly. 2 of the demons immediately stopped in their tracks, their minds suddenly filled with an overwhelming urge to turn around and walk the other way. With the mortals safely isolated, Damien took aim at the 2 remaining monsters. Avada Kedavra. He cast the unforgivable curse twice in rapid succession. 2 blinding flashes of sickly green light erupted from his wand, striking the true phantom demons. Spirit state or not, nothing could withstand the killing curse. It severed the soul directly from the body. The monsters shrieked as the green light consumed them. As they died, the surrounding mist popped and vanished like a pricked bubble, leaving only 2 hideous corpses lying motionless in the snow. Damien lowered his wand and rubbed his temples. Though the battle had been brief, casting the killing curse required intense, genuine lethal intent. Firing it off twice in a row left a throbbing ache of mental fatigue behind his eyes. With the mist gone, the normal sounds of the forest returned. The wind rustled through the sparse bushes by the roadside. A few yards away, Chris and Tina shook off the effects of the Muggle repelling charm and the lingering illusions, blinking in confusion. Realizing what had happened, Chris ran over and hugged Tina tightly, his heart pounding with lingering terror. If not for the young wizard, they would have been driven mad and slaughtered in the fog. Lord Damien, thank you. Thank you for saving us again, he gasped gratefully. Damien simply nodded. He looked at the clearing road ahead. How much further to Whitestone Town? We are almost there, Chris panted. Just past this slope and 2 bends in the road. Damien stepped down from his ice pillar and approached the dead phantom demons. Their illusion magic was the very first local spellcraft he had witnessed in this world. He was incredibly curious about the differences between this world's magical beasts and the magical creatures native to his home world. With a flick of his wand, he transfigured a patch of snow into a sturdy sack and levitated one of the demon corpses inside. Now that the creature was dead, its physical form had solidified and could be touched. As Damien's fingers brushed the dead flesh, the metal disc in his mind flared with light. A thick stream of red energy floated up from the corpse and vanished into his palm. He checked his internal connection to the artifact and smiled. The crystal was completely full. From this moment on, he had the power to return to his original world whenever he wished. 75 stones, unlock 1 bonus chapter. 150 stones, unlock 2 bonus chapters. 300 stones, unlock 3 bonus chapters. Chapter 4, The Dual World Slytherin 4. Damien returned. This time, there was none of the agonizing discomfort from his initial crossing. The crystal on the metal disc had dimmed significantly, its stored energy completely exhausted. Damien had chosen to travel back to his original world before ever reaching Whitestone Town. His initial trip had been an accident. He had only brought his wand, so he intended to make proper preparations before formally making contact with human society in the other world. He waved his wand, untransfiguring his thick cloak and winter clothes back to their original state. He had also brought back the snow-packed bundle containing the corpse of the phantom demon. Nox was still sitting in his exact original spot, staring at the empty space where Damien had just been. "Hey, Nox!" Damien picked up the Niazel and stroked his black fur. A subtle magic rippled in Damien's eyes as he gently used legilimency on the cat. Through Nox's memories, he watched the exact moment of his departure. 1 second, his past self was standing there holding the glowing metal disc. In the blink of an eye, bathed in a sudden flash of crimson light, he vanished completely into thin air. Nox had barely even twitched his whiskers in surprise before Damien reappeared in the exact same spot, now carrying a snow-packed bundle. Damien blinked, breaking the mental connection. It seemed that while he had spent hours fighting for his life in the other world, time in his original world had barely moved forward at all. Setting Nox down, Damien pulled out the battered wizard's notebook Chris had given him. It recorded a spell based purely on ancient runes called Lightning Bolt. The spell shot a concentrated beam of lightning at a target, its raw power scaling directly with the user's magical reserves. The magic of the other world was fundamentally different from the magic he learned at Hogwarts. Hogwarts magic relied on emotion, willpower, and incantations to shape spells. A lack of firm belief could easily cause a spell to fizzle and fail entirely. In contrast, the other world's magic required the caster to first mentally construct a precise spell model. Then, they had to inject raw magic into it, using the model to release the energy in a specific physical form. The basic building blocks for these spell models were ancient runes, physically condensed out of raw magic. The spell model was like an engine, the ancient runes were the mechanical parts, and magic was the gasoline. Through the engine's mechanics, the magic was converted into lethal energy. This was the core principle of runic magic. Damien extended his right hand, concentrating his magic into his palm. Slowly, he forced the energy to condense into the ancient rune for light. The glowing rune hovered over his palm like a pure, crystal-clear pearl, emitting a soft radiance. Damien frowned and cut the flow of magic. The rune instantly vanished. It had taken him a dozen seconds just to condense that single rune. Even with practice, he might only shorten the process to 10 seconds. However, the lightning bolt spell model required simultaneously condensing 32 distinct runic scripts. To cast a single runic spell, meticulously forming the runes would take several minutes if not longer. It was absurdly impractical for real combat. There has to be a way to speed up the condensation process, he thought. Flipping past the lightning bolt section, Damien's expression shifted. The handwriting on the very last page of the notebook was heavily blurred by age and water damage. He drew his wand and tapped the parchment. Reparo. Like a film rewinding, the faded ink bled back into crisp, legible lines. It revealed a single, cryptic sentence. I walked in the dim woodland, heard the sound of drums, and saw the panel of shadows. Panel of shadows. Damien frowned. The sentence was inexplicable, he couldn't glean any useful information from it. Setting the mystery aside, he pocketed the notebook, left the storeroom, and walked to his grandfather's study. He pushed the door open. Good afternoon, grandfather. Damien, it is nap time, a lazy voice drawled from a large portrait on the wall. Inside the gilded frame sat a gentle, refined old man. This was the magical portrait of Damien's grandfather, Alphard Black. Although Alphard had passed away before Damien was born, the boy's entire early magical education had been guided by this portrait. Before his death, Alphard had painstakingly synchronized his vast intellect and memories into the canvas. Damien had learned ancient runes directly from him. Alphard Black had been a renowned runic scholar during his lifetime. In this life, Damien's father had been an Auror and his mother a Muggle. Both had died at the hands of Death Eaters, specifically, murdered by Damien's own aunt, Bellatrix Lestrange. "I don't recall you ever having a habit of taking naps," Damien retorted lightly. In the painting, Alphard reached into the painted wine cabinet behind him and withdrew a bottle of red. "I did when I was alive, dear boy." "Is grandmother out again?" Damien asked, noticing her empty frame. Alphard popped the cork, brought the bottle to his nose, and wafted the aroma. "You know Lena. She loves to visit. She has portraits hanging in half the manors in Britain." Damien nodded in understanding. "Grandfather, I want to show you something." He extended his right hand and willed his magic into the physical shape of a glowing rune. Alphard swirled the ruby liquid in his glass, looking unimpressed. "As for the magical application of ancient runes, I believe I explained that in exhausting detail during our lessons on the collection of magic symbols." "Of course I read it," Damien replied. "But I recently discovered that runic script has much deeper, physical applications." Concentrating, Damien meticulously condensed all 32 scripts for the lightning bolt model in his palm. He carefully used his magic to weave them into the specific engine-like structure. Crack! A blinding light erupted. The runic matrix converted his magic into a vicious beam of lightning, shooting forward and instantly blasting a neat hole right through the wooden study wall. Damien casually waved his wand, restoring the scorched wood to its original state. Was that magic formed by combining ancient runes? Alphard's painted face was entirely slack with shock. He knew there was a theoretical connection between runic script and ancient magic. Yet, despite dedicating his life to the study, he had only ever seen vague references in crumbling tomes. He never expected his 14-year-old grandson to casually master a working runic spell. After Damien thoroughly explained the engine and fuel principle of runic magic, Alphard stroked his chin thoughtfully. "No wonder it took you several minutes to cast. I initially thought it was mere lack of proficiency. But listening to your theory, it seems runic magic is missing a crucial component to speed up the process." Damien sighed helplessly. "Exactly. Manually condensing the scripts takes far too long for practical use." Alphard suddenly paused, his eyes lighting up. He took a slow sip of wine, looking uncertain. "I once saw a marginal note on a manuscript belonging to Salazar Slytherin. It read, 'Meditation is the key to runic scripture.'" Damien blinked in surprise. "Meditation? That's the key?" "I haven't the faintest clue," Alphard admitted. "That manuscript only recorded definitions of ancient characters. I merely cited some of its contents when compiling my own phonetic tables." He pointed a painted finger at Damien. "The original manuscript should still be stored in the restricted section of the Hogwarts library. Perhaps you can look for it when you return to school." Damien nodded, mentally filing the task away. At that exact moment, an ethereal, melodic voice drifted in from outside the window. "Damien, are you up there?" Damien walked over and leaned out the window. Down on the lawn, a girl with dirty blonde hair was waving up at him brightly. "Luna. Wait just a moment." Damien called back. Turning around, he saw Alphard winking at him over his wine glass. Keeping a young lady waiting is hardly the behavior of a gentleman. Damien rolled his eyes. "Grandfather, we're literally children." 75 stones, unlock 1 bonus chapter. 150 stones, unlock 2 bonus chapters. 300 stones, unlock 3 bonus chapters. Chapter 5, The Dual World Slytherin 5. The outdoor breeze carried the scent of sunshine and wild grass. Under the sycamore tree stood a girl with messy, waist-length, dark golden brown hair and very light eyebrows. She wore dirigible plum earrings and a necklace strung with butterbeer corks. "How did you know I was in the study?" "The main door and my room are in the other direction." Damien was a bit curious about the girl shouting at him from beneath the window. "I saw a raxbird fly into that room, so I guessed you'd be there." The little girl's voice was airy, as if she were singing a soft melody. Raxspurt. Luna said dreamily, Raxspurts, they're invisible. They fly in through your ears and muddle your brain. Damien, the Thunderbird egg you gave me is about to hatch. Luna suddenly remembered her purpose. She opened the cardboard box in her arms, revealing a pure gold Thunderbird egg inside. The golden shell now sported a web of tiny cracks, and through the fissures, damp feathers could be vaguely seen. Damien carefully examined the egg, his eyes widening in surprise. This is truly remarkable. He had confiscated this Thunderbird egg from a dark wizard and given it to Luna as a birthday gift. More than 6 months had passed since then. Damien and Luna had tried countless methods to incubate it, but none had worked. Luna smiled cheerfully. I wrote a letter to Grandpa Newt, and he told me to rub sunflower pollen on the egg every day. He said if I did that for 3 weeks, it would hatch. Damien asked in surprise, Newt's commander? The magi zoologist who wrote Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. Luna nodded. Grandpa Newt used to submit articles to the Quibbler. I asked Dad for his contact information and sent him a pair of dirigible plum earrings as a thank you. That's definitely her style, Damien thought amusedly. Just then, a commotion echoed from the cardboard box. The cracks in the golden egg rapidly widened. A small life struggled vigorously inside the shell, and faint, high-pitched cries drifted into the air. A moment later, a sharp, eagle-like beak pierced the golden shell, and a tiny thunderbird squeezed its way out into the world. Luna beamed at the successfully hatched chick. She pointed to the sycamore tree by the wall. We should build a home for it up there. Damien hesitated. Why build a nest here? I'm going back to Hogwarts next week, so I won't be able to help take care of the little guy. Luna tilted her head, her light-colored eyes curving into happy crescent moons. I think it will like it here. Besides, I can come over to see it every day. Looking into her genuine smile, Damien's expression softened. Okay. The next morning. Westminster, London. Charing Cross Road. With a sharp crack of displaced air, Damien operated at the entrance of the leaky cauldron. Despite a person appearing entirely out of thin air, the rushing Muggle pedestrians paid him no mind, their eyes sliding right past the magically concealed pub. He pushed open the door. Inside, the pub was stuffy, noisy, dim, and wonderfully dilapidated. As Damien stepped inside, the noisy chatter near the entrance paused for a brief moment. Old Tom, the toothless landlord, was wiping glasses behind the bar. He waved a rag at Damien. Hey! Black! You're here! Fancy a drink? Damien nodded with a polite smile. A butterbeer, please. In the wizarding world, butterbeer was a mildly warming, comforting beverage suitable for all ages. Old Tom poured him a foaming mug and slid it across the counter. This one's on the house. Thanks for that batch of scab-healing potion. Then, Tom cautiously glanced around the crowded room. Leaning in close, he whispered, Someone's after you. Before Damien could respond, Tom straightened up and went right back to wiping glasses, acting as if he hadn't said a word. Damien silently took a sip of his butterbeer. Someone is after me? He carefully scrolled through the mental list of people he had offended. There were simply too many. Although he was a descendant of the ancient and most noble House of Black, his grandfather, Alfard, had been famously disowned and blasted off the family tapestry. When Damien was sorted into Slytherin House, the real trouble had begun. Many Slytherin students were the children of Death Eaters, the very people who had murdered his parents. This had sparked a vicious cycle of bullying, isolation, and extortion during his early days at Hogwarts. Fortunately, Damien's magical talent was monstrous. While his peers were fumbling with basic jinxes and pranks, he had already mastered an arsenal of offensive and defensive spells. In his first year, he ruthlessly crushed the students who tried to bother him. By his second year, no one in his grade dared to even look at him wrong. Since Slytherin House ultimately respected pure strength and ambition, he had even gathered a few loyal followers after establishing his dominance. He chugged the rest of his butterbeer and slipped out into the small, walled courtyard behind the pub. The space held nothing but a trash can and some overgrown weeds. After confirming the courtyard was empty, Damien pulled a flask of dark green potion from his robes and downed it in one gulp. A burning sensation crawled down his throat, rapidly fermenting into a nauseating, violently unpleasant taste. Instantly, his face contorted in agony. It felt as though hot wax was bubbling beneath his skin. His eyes, nose, mouth, and ears began to melt and shift, his entire facial structure rearranging itself. Then, his bones began to snap and stretch, emitting a series of sickening crunches. A minute later, the polyjuice potion had finished its work. Damien had transformed into a gaunt, red-haired man with sinister, sunken eyes. He tested a few facial expressions and stretched his limbs, adapting to the strange new body. Drawing his wand, he cast a quick transfiguration spell on his clothes, altering them to fit his new height and morphing them into nondescript, black wizarding robes. Stepping up to the brick wall above the trash can, he tapped a specific brick 3 times with the tip of his wand. The brick vibrated. A small hole appeared, rapidly expanding as the surrounding bricks folded back upon themselves, forming a wide archway that led to a winding, cobblestone street. Diagon Alley was bustling with life. Shop windows displayed all sorts of magical wonders, intricate alchemical tools, preserved creature limbs, brightly colored furs, and jars containing eyeballs the size of melons. Damien briefly walked through the main thoroughfare before slipping down a shadowy side street into Nocturne Alley. He had a batch of potions to offload. The dark alleyway was located near Gringotts, but its atmosphere was worlds apart from Diagon Alley. The moment he stepped inside, a faint, sour odor hit his nose. Thick moss clung to the crumbling brickwork, plaster peeled from the buildings, and murky sewage trickled along the gutters. The street was dim and chaotic. Every wizard lingering in the shadows exuded a dangerous, unsavory aura. In a dark corner on the right side of the street, a stout, bearded wizard was squatting on the ground. His face lit up the moment he spotted Damien's disguised form. He scrambled to his feet, brushing off his robes. Furtively glancing around to ensure they weren't being watched, the man muttered, "I've been waiting forever. I thought you weren't coming. Do you have all the goods?" 75 stones, unlock 1 bonus chapter. 150 stones, unlock 2 bonus chapters. 300 stones, unlock 3 bonus chapters. Chapter 6, The Dual World Slytherin 6. Under the effects of the polyjuice potion, Damien's eyes were cold and sinister. Expressionless, he reached into a pocket expanded by an undetectable extension charm and pulled out 20 vials of purple liquid. 20 vials of sleeping draught. Check the goods. The short, squat wizard rubbed his hands together excitedly. This isn't our first trade. I trust you, Gelman. Mundungus Fletcher took the vials, popped a cork, and took a deep sniff. A satisfied grin spread across his grubby face. He pulled a jingling bag of galleons from his tattered robes and tossed it to Damien. Settled. Mundungus was a notorious thief who had bought many batches of sleeping draught from Damien. He regularly used the potion to quietly knock out his targets before making off with their valuables. Just as Damien finished counting the gold, 6 wizards in heavy black robes stepped out of the shadows. They formed a tight semicircle, cutting off the alleyway. They eyed the galleons in Damien's hand with open greed. However, the one-eyed wizard leading the pack pointed his wand squarely at Mundungus. Mundungus! I've finally cornered you! Mundungus trembled violently at the sound of the voice, sheer terror crossing his face. He immediately spun around to flee. Unfortunately, the dead-end corner he had specifically chosen to avoid prying eyes now completely blocked his escape. Realizing he was trapped, Mundungus plastered on a fawning, desperate smile. "Rainer, mate! I don't recall ever offending you. Why, we were just drinking together the other week. The one-eyed wizard sneered. Don't remember? Then let me help you jog your memory. Crucio. Mundungus collapsed to the cobblestones. He screamed in agony, his body convulsing as if he were being sliced apart by 1,000 invisible blades. The excruciating pain made it impossible for him to do anything but writhe and thrash in the filth. Rainer laughed cruelly. Starting to remember now? Crucio. Another bolt of vicious red light struck the thief. The extreme pain overloaded Mundungus's senses, leaving his body twitching involuntarily on the ground. The one-eyed wizard's cruel smile widened as he shifted his wand toward Damien. Mundungus just bought his knockout drafts from you, didn't he? We saw the gold. He stole a lot of merchandise from me last time, so you're going to compensate me for my losses. With a subtle flick of his right wrist, the wand hidden in Damien's sleeve slid smoothly into his palm. What he does with the potions is none of my business, he said in a low, cold voice. Our transaction is finished. Rainer spotted the wand, but a flash of disdain crossed his good eye. He looked greedily at Damien's coin pouch. There are 6 of us, boy. If you don't want a taste of the Cruciatus curse yourself, hand over the galleons. When Damien remained completely unmoved, the impatient wizard slashed his wand downward. Crucio. Damien moved like lightning. With a sharp jab of his wand, he cast a summoning charm Oxio robes. Pulling the nearest bald wizard directly into the path of the brilliant red light to act as a meat shield. The bald wizard shrieked. Unable to withstand the unforgivable curse, he began twitching uncontrollably, his momentum sending him crashing heavily into Rainer. Both men tumbled to the filthy ground in a tangle of limbs, pinning the one-eyed wizard beneath his convulsing comrade. Get him, the remaining 4 wizards roared in rage. They raised their wands, firing a volley of dark curses straight at Damien. Damien didn't blink. He pointed his wand at the alley floor. The cobblestones surged upward, transfiguring into a massive, solid granite boulder that absorbed every incoming spell. With another flick, he banished the massive rock forward. It exploded mid-air into a storm of heavy, jagged shrapnel, pelting the 4 attackers. The wizards hurriedly threw up shield charms. Bang! 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 The heavy stones battered their magical barriers, kicking up a thick cloud of dust and debris that completely obscured the dead-end corner. Damien didn't stop. Relying purely on memory and spatial awareness, he slashed his wand repeatedly through the dust cloud. Diffindo! Diffindo! The sharp whistles of overpowered severing charms sliced through the air, instantly followed by panicked screams. As the dust slowly settled, 3 wizards lay bleeding and groaning on the ground. Besides Damien, only 1 attacker remained standing. Damien walked forward expressionlessly. With every step, his wand emitted a sharp bolt of blue light Petrificus totalis, striking the groaning wizards and locking their bodies in rigid full body binds so they couldn't retaliate. The last standing wizard stared at Damien in absolute terror. His wand hand trembled so violently he couldn't even manage to raise it. Don't come any closer, he shrieked, backing away. Another flash of blue light struck him square in the chest, and he toppled over backward, stiff as a board. Now, Damien was the only wizard left standing in the alley. Avada Kedavra! Rainer, the one-eyed wizard who had been crushed earlier, had regained consciousness. Propped up on his elbows from the dirt, he aimed his wand and fired the killing curse directly at Damien's back. But Damien hadn't let his guard down for a second. Reflexively diving to the left, he felt the sickening chill of the green beam as it streaked just inches past his right shoulder. As he hit the ground, Damien fired a lethal counter-curse. A brutal severing charm sliced through the dark, cutting cleanly across the one-eyed wizard's neck. Rainer instantly went silent, collapsing back into the muck. Pathetic, Damien muttered. After looting the bodies, he only found a few dozen galleons between the 6 of them. Fortunately, he also collected 6 unregistered wands, which were always useful. Damien hadn't actually wanted to get involved. He didn't care about Mundungus Fletcher in the slightest. But those 6 thugs had been blinded by greed, dragging an innocent potion seller into their mess. Mundungus was now slumped against the brick wall, his body still trembling violently. The nerve damage from enduring 2 consecutive cruciatus curses had not yet passed. He opened his mouth to speak, but only a dry rasp came out. Damien pulled 2 more vials from his pocket. A calming draught and a pain-relieving potion. These will counteract the after-effects of the crucio. Once Mundungus snatched and downed both potions, Damien offered him a chillingly polite smile. That'll be 100 galleons total. Thank you for your continued business. Mundungus's face twitched at the exorbitant price, but he couldn't argue. As the potions took effect, his pale complexion significantly improved. After catching his breath, he frantically fumbled through his many pockets. Even after emptying them completely, he only managed to scrape together about 50 galleons. Desperate, he pulled out a square, wooden music box. Look, this music box is damaged, but it's a cursed artifact. It slightly interferes with a wizard's magic flow in the vicinity. Can this cover the other 50 galleons? Damien took the box and examined it closely. It was only about the size of his palm and exquisitely crafted, despite a significant crack along the side. It was clearly an alchemical item. He could feel a faint, chaotic ripple of magic emanating from it the moment it touched his skin. Seeing Damien's interest, Mundungus urged, "Try it out. Just turn the winding key on the side." Damien turned the small brass key. The slightly protruding cylinder began to rotate at a steady speed. Because of the damage, the haunting melody it produced was intermittent and warped. As the twisted music played, Damien immediately felt the magic within his own body being slightly disrupted, its flow becoming jagged and uneven. However, by simply concentrating and forcing his magic to circulate, he could easily negate the interference. Still, though the disruption was slight, causing a sudden stutter during an enemy's spell casting could result in disastrous backfires. Damien pocketed the music box with a satisfied nod. This will cover the remaining 50 galleons. 75 stones, unlock 1 bonus chapter. 150 stones, unlock 2 bonus chapters. 300 stones, unlock 3 bonus chapters. Chapter 7, The Dual World Slytherin 7. London, King's Cross Station, Platform 9/3/4. Beside the bustling platform docked a gleaming red steam engine. A sign hanging overhead read, Hogwarts Express, 11 o'clock. Today was the first day of term. The station was exceptionally lively, packed with young wizards preparing for the journey to school. Owls hooted from their cages over the din of the crowd, and cats darted between the legs of frantic parents. Damien felt a wave of nostalgia. He had taken trains in his past life, too. He remembered his first long-distance train ride vividly. He hadn't been able to buy a seat, making those dozen hours utterly miserable. The front carriages were already packed with students. Holding Knox, Damien pushed his way toward the back and found an empty compartment. He sat down by the window, and the Niazel immediately leaped from his arms. "The train will be leaving soon," Damien called out. "Don't wander off, Knox." "Meow," Knox replied, casually strolling out of the compartment anyway. Damien watched the crowd outside the window. Spotting no familiar faces, he reached into his magically expanded pocket and pulled out a copy of the Quibbler. Luna had mentioned publishing an article in this issue. He found her piece in the bottom right corner of the second page. It featured an eye-catching magical photograph, a moving loop of someone feeding a baby thunderbird. The article itself was a straightforward log documenting the chick's diet of earthworms. Damien frowned slightly. Publishing photos of a highly restricted magical beast like a thunderbird might attract unwanted attention from the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures. Still, since Luna was in contact with Newt's commander, she could probably ask him to smooth things over if the ministry came knocking. Before Damien could dwell on it, two red-haired twins poked their heads into the compartment. "Hey, Fred, look who it is." Damien turned to see George doing a bizarre, twisting jig in the corridor, pointing both hands at his brother. Fred clutched his head with one hand and his stomach with the other, hunching over dramatically. "Who is it?" George continued his ridiculous dance, swinging his arms wildly. "It's the new king of Slytherin." Fred threw his arms up, pointed double finger guns at Damien, and hopped backward. "Damien Black." Damien felt enough second-hand embarrassment to instantly dig a hole through the floorboards. "What are you two doing now?" he sighed helplessly. "Stop giving me these weird titles." Fred blinked in surprise. "You haven't heard? We didn't come up with it. Got it straight from Percy," George added, leaning against the door frame. "He says you're getting quite famous among the upper years." Damien frowned, a sense of unease creeping in. This King of Slytherin title felt like a target being painted on his back. If it was circulating among the older students, someone was deliberately fanning the flames. It lined up perfectly with old Tom's warning at the leaky cauldron about someone keeping an eye on him. But Damien wasn't afraid. He had hidden his true capabilities exceptionally well. While he had built up a dangerous underworld reputation under the alias Gelman, his public identity was simply that of a top-scoring, talented student. Anyone trying to plot against him based on that incomplete profile was going to end up with a bloody nose. Changing the subject, Damien pulled the wooden music box from his pocket. "This artifact slightly interferes with a wizard's magical flow, but it's damaged. See if you can fix it." Fred and George had a natural genius for enchanting and inventing prank items. Damien wasn't sure if the music box would retain its cursed properties once repaired, but the twins were his best bet. Fred cranked the handle, immediately feeling the subtle disruption in his magic. "Oh, I like this challenge," he said excitedly, pocketing the box. "By the way, the Daily Prophet says Harry Potter is starting this year," George noted. "We're going to go hunt down the savior. Want to come?" Damien shook his head. "I'll pass. We'll all see him at the welcoming feast anyway." Once the twins left, Damien pulled a folded copy of the Daily Prophet from his robes. "Latest report on the illegal break-in at Gringotts," the headline blared. The July vault burglary was still dominating the news, though the article was just the goblins and the Auror office pointing fingers at each other. The rest of the front page was dominated by a massive feature, "The Boy Who Lived in Rolls at Hogwarts." The author vividly detailed Harry's legendary battle with you-know-who. It would have been a thrilling read if one ignored the fact that Harry had literally been a one-year-old baby at the time. Damien recalled the plot from his past life. Voldemort was currently possessing Professor Quirrell. The Gringotts break-in had to be their doing. The Dark Lord was hunting for the Philosopher's Stone to resurrect himself. Quirrell would soon try to sneak the stone out of Hogwarts. Damien had absolutely no intention of getting involved. The Savior and Dumbledore could handle that mess themselves. Right now, Damien could sense the crystal on his metal disc was almost completely recharged. It wouldn't be long before he could cross dimensions again. Exploring the magic of that alternate world was his true priority. "So this is where you're hiding, Damien." A brown-haired boy with bright eyes stood in the compartment doorway. He stepped inside and slumped into the seat opposite Damien. "Hey, Jerry." Jerry Abbott was a fellow third-year Slytherin and one of Damien's roommates. Damien lowered his newspaper, looking surprised. "Just you? Aren't you and Gerald both from Godric's Hollow? Didn't you travel together?" "Gerald?" Jerry rolled his eyes dramatically. "He came to the platform with me, but then he ran off to find his new girlfriend and told me to find you myself." Gerald Bohan was Damien's other roommate. Much like a certain monster-hunting witcher from Damien's past life with the same name, he was an incorrigible womanizer. Gerald's list of ex-girlfriends probably outnumbered the total spells known by the entire first-year class. A new girlfriend? Is it Emma, the girl he met right before the holidays? Damien rummaged through his extended pocket, pulled out 2 bottles of chilled soda, and tossed one to Jerry. Jerry cracked the soda open, took a deep gulp, and sighed. Your information is woefully outdated. He switched girls again over the summer. Poor Amanda, she spent the whole break flying across the country delivering his love letters. I'm genuinely afraid she's going to die of exhaustion. Amanda was Gerald Sowell. Classic, Damien said, unscrewing his own cap. He took a sip, completely unfazed by his roommate's romantic exploits. He was used to it by now. Jerry, however, wasn't done complaining. At the rate he changes girlfriends, he grumbled, by the time we graduate, we'll bump into at least 9 of his exes just taking a stroll through the Ministry of Magic. Leaning forward, Jerry suddenly changed the subject, his voice dropping to a mysterious whisper. Guess who I saw when I was boarding? Who? Damien asked, amused enough to play along. The savior himself, Harry Potter. Jerry announced with exaggerated flair. 75 stones, unlock 1 bonus chapter. 150 stones, unlock 2 bonus chapters. 300 stones, unlock 3 bonus chapters. Chapter 8, The Dual World Slytherin 8. Damien smiled, leaning back against his seat. Is he very special? Jerry's face fell, looking utterly disappointed. He's very ordinary. If I hadn't overheard the Weasleys talking on the platform, I wouldn't have even realized he was Harry Potter. He doesn't look like a savior at all. But you know, he's the one who defeated. Jerry paused, lowering his voice, defeated you-know-who. Perhaps that was actually his parents' achievement. Damien casually took a wrapped sandwich out of his pocket. Want one? I have plenty. Jerry took the sandwich, looking genuinely surprised. That's the first time I've ever heard that perspective. Damien took out a second sandwich, took a bite, and shrugged. The night you-know-who disappeared, his parents were right there with him. The Potters were killed by you-know-who that exact same night. Jerry grew animated, his eyes widening as if he had just uncovered a massive conspiracy. You-know-who disappeared right after they died, Jerry muttered, piecing it together. Speaking of which, it really is much more plausible that the Potters and you-know-who perished together in some massive magical backlash. That makes way more sense than a newborn baby being a savior. But why does everyone think it was Harry? Who knows? Perhaps the people at the time simply needed a living savior to rally behind. Damien didn't remember the exact canon details. In his past life, he had only seen 2 of the movies, and most of his lore knowledge came from internet forums. When he had first transmigrated to this world, Lord Voldemort was still at the height of his power, but Damien had been far too young to participate in or witness any of those events. Just then, the compartment door slid open. A young witch with bushy brown hair grasped the handle, peering inside with a bossy, searching look. Has either of you seen a toad? She asked briskly. She gestured to a round-faced, tearful boy standing just behind her. Neville's lost one. Both Damien and Jerry shook their heads. Seeing Neville looking like he was on the verge of a breakdown, Damien offered a comforting smile. Don't worry. A magical pet will usually return to its master on its own. The little witch nodded, looking somewhat disappointed. Sorry to bother you, then. She turned, intending to continue her search in the next carriage. But before she could slide the door shut, a dark shadow darted straight through her legs. The blur leaped into the compartment and dove directly into Damien's lap. Once she saw it clearly, the little witch's eyes lit up. It was a sleek black cat with a pair of stunning, intelligent blue eyes. Nox, what is that in your mouth? Damien felt a sudden, sinking premonition. He could clearly see the webbed leg of an amphibian sticking out from the corner of the Niazel's jaws. Nox purred, rubbed his arched back against Damien's chest, and proudly dropped his prize onto the small table by the window. It was a toad. Neville stared at the toad lying belly up and motionless on the table. His expression underwent a drastic, rapid-fire transformation. Damien watched in silent amusement as Neville's face morphed from grief, to blank confusion, to sheer shock, to fiery anger, and finally right back to devastating grief, all in the span of 3 seconds. If this had been recorded and posted online in Damien's past life, netizens would have hailed it as an Oscar-worthy master class in acting. Damien quickly reached out to inspect the casualty. The toad had merely been playing dead. The moment Damien scooped it into his hand, it started kicking its legs vigorously. A quick check revealed absolutely no external injuries. Knox didn't hurt it, Damien thought, breathing a sigh of relief. Fortunately, the Niazel was smart enough not to actually eat the other students' pets. Like I said, a magical pet will return to its master's side. Damien smiled, handing the wriggling toad back to Neville. Though sometimes, the way they return is quite unexpected. Seeing that Trevor was completely unharmed, Neville's tears instantly gave way to a relieved smile. He hugged the toad tightly to his chest, repeatedly bowing his head. "Thank you. Oh, thank you." The bushy-haired witch also breathed a heavy sigh of relief. She had been terrified that the toad had been bitten to death by the beautiful black cat. Cats might be cute, but hunting small animals was in their nature. Curious, she stepped fully into the compartment and crouched beside Damien's seat. "Is this your cat?" "His eyes are absolutely beautiful," she said softly. She paused, admiring the sleek coat. "His fur is lovely, too. His name is Knox. You can pet him, he won't bite," Damien offered, seeing the girl's eager intent. Delighted, the little witch reached out and gently stroked the fur along Knox's back. Knox gave her a brief, calculating glance before deciding she was acceptable. He lay down comfortably on the seat and began to meticulously groom his front paw. After petting the cat for a moment, the girl seemed to remember her manners. She stood up straighter and cleared her throat. "My name is Hermione Granger, by the way. I'm a first year." "Just as I thought," Damien mused. This bushy-haired girl was the Savior's famous best friend, Damien Black. "And this is Jerry Abbott," Damien introduced, gesturing across the compartment. "We are both third years in Slytherin House." Jerry offered an awkward, tight-lipped smile and a stiff wave. Despite being quite chatty in private with Damien, he suffered from social anxiety and was notoriously reserved around strangers. Neville, who had just managed to calm down, physically recoiled at the word. "Slytherin," he squeaked, suddenly taking a large step backward toward the corridor. Damien chuckled, highly amused. "Neville, please relax." Neville glanced between Damien and Jerry with visible caution, his voice trembling. "My gran often says that Slytherin is the house with all the dark wizards." Damien smirked and shot Jerry a dry look. "Our house reputation really does precede us, doesn't it?" Jerry just rolled his eyes, refusing to engage with the first years. "Speaking of which, Gryffindor doesn't necessarily produce fewer dark wizards than Slytherin," Damien said, his tone turning analytical as he looked back at the younger students. "In fact, proportionally speaking, Slytherin is currently the house with the fewest active dark wizards." Seeing Hermione's thoroughly confused gaze, Damien elaborated. "It has been a decade of peace since you-know-who fell. The wizarding population has grown significantly. Yet, among Hogwarts graduates each year, less than 1/10 manage to secure a job at the Ministry of Magic. The same goes for other mainstream wizarding professions. Not every student can find stable work after graduation." Damien leaned forward, his voice calm and reasoned. "In times of peace, the wizards who cannot find legitimate work are the demographic most likely to turn to the dark arts for survival. Meanwhile, most Slytherin students are the heirs of wealthy, established wizarding families. Finding a lucrative job or simply inheriting an estate is much easier for them than for wizards born into Muggle families who have no connections." Hearing this was like a bolt from the blue for Hermione. She had never even considered the wizarding economy or her future job prospects. Her mind immediately began to race, panicking over whether she would be forced to go back to the Muggle world and take over her parents' dental practice if she couldn't secure magical employment. Neville bravely tried to argue. But my gran said that almost all the Death Eaters were from Slytherin. You know who has fallen, Damien countered smoothly, giving Neville a meaningful, piercing look. The Death Eaters who were actually convicted are either dead or rotting in Azkaban. And legally speaking, those who aren't locked in Azkaban are recognized by the Ministry as upstanding citizens, not dark wizards. Neville's round face quickly turned beet red. He desperately wanted to refute Damien's logic, but he didn't know enough about the law or the post-war trials to even know where to start. But how are the houses sorted, then? Hermione interrupted, her anxiety mounting rapidly. Are there differences in the curriculum between the houses? Is there a difference in the quality of education? Will my house placement affect my ability to find a job? Damien smiled, thoroughly enjoying playing the part of the mysterious, intimidating upperclassman. There is a test during the sorting, he said vaguely, his voice dropping to a dramatic whisper. As for the rest, you'll find out if you survive the test. There's an entrance test. Hermione squeaked, looking even more horrified. 75 stones, unlock 1 bonus chapter. 150 stones, unlock 2 bonus chapters. 300 stones, unlock 3 bonus chapters. Chapter 9, The Dual World Slytherin 9. The sky outside the train window had already turned completely dark, and the magical lamps inside the compartment had long been lit. Damien sat quietly, reading a travelogue. In his spare time, he occasionally read miscellaneous books, hoping to find interesting historical clues or hidden magical theories within their pages. Across from him, Neville had fallen asleep clutching his toad. Nearby, an anxious Hermione sat perched on the edge of her seat, muttering frantically to herself while gripping a heavy textbook. Jerry shot Damien a look of sheer disdain. This guy absolutely loved terrorizing the first years. Jerry still remembered the day Damien had fooled him with the exact same prank. We will be reaching Hogwarts in 5 minutes, a magically magnified voice echoed through the train. Please leave your luggage on the train, it will be taken to the school separately. The train's speed gradually slowed until, with a final hiss of steam, it came to a complete halt. After a 10-hour journey, they had finally reached their destination. Despite the loud announcement, Neville was still sleeping soundly. We're here. Damien leaned over and patted Neville's shoulder to wake him up. As the boy blinked groggily, Damien stood up and straightened his robes. Let's go. A professor will be along to collect you first years for your entrance test shortly. We'll part ways here. See you around, if fate allows. The bleary-eyed Neville snapped awake instantly. He scrambled to grab his textbooks, his round face turning deathly pale. Oh no! There's an entrance test. I just fell asleep and didn't memorize a single thing. Would he be expelled before he even started? He might be the first unlucky child in the long, proud history of the Longbottom family to be kicked out of Hogwarts on the very first day. He had no idea how he would ever face his grandmother if he had to take the train straight back home tomorrow. Hermione completely ignored his panic. She was clutching a copy of 1000 Magical Herbs and Fungi, muttering to herself as she desperately tried to cram the entire book into her short-term memory. Damien smiled slightly as he stepped out into the corridor. Technically, he hadn't lied to them. There was an entrance test, it was just the sorting ceremony. They only needed to sit on a stool and put on the sorting hat to pass. Damien and Jerry were among the first to disembark. They walked along the dark, chilly platform toward the dirt road where a line of horseless carriages awaited the older students. Behind them, a booming voice echoed over the heads of the crowd, "First years! First years over here!" The man shouting was unusually massive, so tall that the nearby first years barely reached his thighs. He held a large magical lantern, making him a conspicuous beacon in the dark. It was Rubeus Hagrid, the keeper of keys and grounds at Hogwarts. Jerry picked an empty carriage and wrinkled his nose in dissatisfaction. Does anyone ever clean these? The upholstery is practically moldy. He pulled out his wand and cast a quick scouring charm over the seats before climbing inside. Damien was about to follow when he raised an eyebrow. A blond boy was jogging toward them through the gloom. "Yo, Gerald," Jerry called out, having spotted him too. "Don't you need to escort your new girlfriend?" Gerald rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. "Pansy is a first year. She has to cross the lake in the boats and attend the sorting ceremony first." "Pansy?" Damien found the name somewhat familiar. "You won't even spare the girls who haven't officially enrolled yet?" Jerry teased ruthlessly. "Your tastes are certainly broad." After the three of them settled in, the carriage lurched forward and began to sway as it rolled up the path. Gerald spent the ride excitedly recounting his incredibly busy, drama-filled summer. Before long, the carriage clattered to a halt beside the grand stone steps leading up to the castle's main oak doors. Sitting closest to the door, Gerald was the first to jump down. "I'm starving," he complained, rubbing his stomach. "And we still have to sit through the whole sorting ceremony before the feast." He had brought plenty of snacks on the train, but Pansy had eaten all of them during the ride. "I still have a few sandwiches left." Damien thoughtfully pulled 3 wrapped sandwiches from his pocket and tossed them to Jerry and Gerald. "Oh! Damien, you're a lifesaver!" Gerald tore into the food, taking massive bites. It was clear he was genuinely ravenous. The three of them walked into the cavernous entrance hall while finishing off their impromptu dinner. Jerry laughed, clapping Gerald on the shoulder. "So, which family is this new girl from? What are you going to do if she gets sorted into Gryffindor?" Gerald stuffed the remaining half of his sandwich into his mouth and spoke around it. "She's from the Parkinson family. And it's not like I haven't dated a Gryffindor before. But there's no way she's going into the Lion's Den. She'll definitely be a Slytherin." "Pansy Parkinson?" Damien finally placed the name. "Wasn't she Draco Malfoy's future lackey and girlfriend in the original timeline?" Jerry immediately went back to mocking him. "I remember when you dated that Gryffindor girl. Didn't she dump a cauldron of ink over your head in the middle of the courtyard when you broke up?" Gerald swallowed his food and puffed out his chest proudly. "That's because I was still young and naive back then. A shrewd Slytherin doesn't trip over the same stone twice." Ever since that incident, Gerald had strictly adhered to a new rule: he only started pursuing a new girl after officially breaking up with the current one. Entering the Great Hall, the trio found seats near the middle of the long Slytherin table. Gerald immediately began enthusiastically greeting the older girls sitting nearby. Within seconds, he was completely engrossed in charming conversation. Damien leaned back and casually glanced up toward the staff table on the raised platform. He immediately locked eyes with a white-bearded old man sitting in the center chair. The headmaster's eyes, framed by half-moon spectacles, were piercingly bright, his azure pupils twinkling with an almost physical weight. Upon making eye contact, Albus Dumbledore offered Damien a kind, knowing smile. Damien maintained his composure and offered a polite smile in return. A few seconds later, Dumbledore seamlessly withdrew his gaze and turned to speak with Professor Snape, his expression perfectly relaxed. Damien frowned internally. He felt like he had just been put on Dumbledore's radar. He had no idea why he would attract the headmaster's personal attention. On paper, he was merely an exceptionally talented student who happened to be at the top of his year. As for his past conflicts with his classmates, intra-house fighting wasn't exactly a rare occurrence in Slytherin. The house was full of pure-blood supremacists, but it also housed many half-bloods. Natural, violent conflict between the two factions was practically a tradition. A sudden commotion at the entrance of the Great Hall drew his attention. Professor McGonagall was leading the line of terrified first-years into the room. The new students looked pale and anxious, clearly having no idea what kind of brutal ordeal they were about to face. At that exact moment, a man with a large purple turban wrapped tightly around his head hurried through a side door and slipped into the great hall. He was late. Damien's eyes locked onto Professor Quirrell's turban. He knew exactly what was hiding beneath it. Lord Voldemort was currently attached to the back of Quirrell's skull like a parasite, using the thick fabric to conceal his monstrous face. Quirrell scurried along the staff table and quickly found a seat as far away from Dumbledore as physically possible. Down on the floor, Professor McGonagall brought out a four-legged wooden stool and placed it before the line of first years. Upon the stool, she carefully set a frayed, incredibly ancient wizard's hat. The sorting hat used to be incredibly dirty, stiff with centuries of grime and sweat at least, until it had encountered Damien. During his own sorting, Damien had casually drawn his wand and blasted the hat with a scouring charm and an augmenti spell before putting it on his head. The hat had shrieked in outrage the moment it touched his wet hair. Azkaban! Azkaban! You should be sorted straight into Azkaban! The great hall fell dead silent. A rip near the brim of the hat opened wide like a mouth, and it began to sing the brand new song it had spent the entire year composing. Look, the skinny one with the scar on his forehead. That's Harry Potter, Jerry whispered, pointing discreetly toward the front of the line. Harry was standing next to a red-haired boy, Ron Weasley. However, Hermione and Neville were nowhere near them. Because of Damien's interference on the train, the iconic trio hadn't actually met yet. Damien was somewhat curious to see what butterfly effect this would cause. Would the Golden Trio be broken up entirely before it even formed? After the sorting hat finished its song to a round of applause, Professor McGonagall stepped forward, a long roll of parchment in her hand. When I call your name, you will put on the hat and sit on the stool to be sorted, she announced clearly. She looked down at the parchment. Abbott, Hannah. 75 stones, unlock 1 bonus chapter. 150 stones, unlock 2 bonus chapters. 300 stones, unlock 3 bonus chapters. Chapter 10, The Dual World Slytherin 10. 3 in the morning. The Slytherin dormitories at the bottom of the Black Lake. Jerry and Gerald were sleeping soundly. The three boys had been in high spirits last night, chatting late into the early hours of the morning before finally passing out. The sorting ceremony had held no surprises. The savior they had discussed all night was placed in Gryffindor. Hermione and Neville hadn't lost their deep-seated bravery due to Damien's minor interference on the train, both had joined the House of Lions as well. Damien sat up in his four-poster bed, feeling completely refreshed. He had taken a specialized potion before going to sleep, an improved draft of dreamless sleep brewed by Professor Snape himself. It worked miracles, fully replenishing a wizard's energy with only 2 hours of rest. Damien's late father had been Snape's senior during their school days, and the two had maintained a good relationship. Because of this, when Snape discovered Damien's monstrous talent for potions, he often had the boy act as his personal laboratory assistant after class. Damien glanced out the window. On a moonless night, the waters of the Black Lake were dark, silent, and eerie. Nox was curled up sleeping by the glass. Damien wondered if the Niazzle was dreaming about catching the giant squid. Focusing his mind, Damien sensed the metal disc. The crystal was glowing brilliantly, the energy was completely full. He concentrated, and the artifact spun rapidly in his mind's eye. A moment later, the dormitory vanished, and he was plunged back into the freezing snow. Chris and Tina were in the exact same positions they had been in before he left. Lord Damien. Chris blinked, looking at him in utter bewilderment. How did your clothes suddenly change? Tina, who had just climbed into the back of the repaired sleigh, also peered over curiously. Damien cursed internally. He quickly pulled out his wand and cast a complex transfiguration spell, reverting his Hogwarts robes back into the thick, furry traveling cloak that matched Chris's memory. A subtle blue light flickered in Damien's eyes as he cast a silent, gentle legilimency spell on the blacksmith. He needed to see exactly what his dimensional travel looked like from an outsider's perspective. Through Chris's eyes, Damien saw that he hadn't physically disappeared. Instead, in the blink of an eye, his heavy winter cloak had inexplicably morphed into his sleek, black Hogwarts uniform. So that's how it works, Damien realized. It seemed that whenever he traveled to a different world, time in the dimension he left behind completely stopped. Before his initial return to Hogwarts, he had told Chris to go ahead and that he would catch up to them in Whitestone Town. Clearly, not a single second had passed here since he activated the disc. Obliviate. Damien waved his wand, smoothly erasing the glitching wardrobe malfunction from both Chris and Tina's minds. Chris dazed for a fraction of a second, then shook his head and sat down in the driver's seat as if nothing had happened. Get in, Lord Damien. We'll reach Whitestone Town by tonight. We won't have to freeze in the wild. Chris was a master blacksmith. He had personally modified the underside of the sleigh with a clever heating furnace. An hour later, the dark silhouette of Whitestone Town finally came into view. The entrance was blocked by a wooden barricade as tall as a man, flanked by a sturdy stone watchtower. The streets beyond were quiet and empty. Chris brought the sleigh to a halt at the gate. Is anyone there? Open up, he shouted. He pulled a leather wineskin from a drawer near the sleigh's heater and took a long swig of hot wine to ward off the biting chill. A head wearing a thick, hooded cap poked out from the tower window. The guard squinted at the sleigh below before pulling his head back inside. A moment later, the heavy wooden door at the base of the tower creaked open. The man from the window stepped out, crossing his arms and yawning widely. Chris? It's freezing out here. What brings you to town at this hour? Chris's craftsmanship was famous across the region, and this particular night watchman had bought weapons from him in the past. Chris hopped down from the driver's seat. Good to see you, Jack. Gem Village hasn't been peaceful lately. The wild animals have gone frenzied and keep attacking the perimeter. My granduncle left a house here in Whitestone Town, so I'm moving Tina here to stay safe. Jack's face lit up. You're moving here? Fantastic. Now I won't have to trek all the way to Gem Village just to get my blades sharpened. You should have moved here years ago. He stepped forward, grabbing the heavy wooden fence to drag it open. Chris moved to help him push. Has Whitestone Town been attacked at all? Why are you the only night watchman at the gate? We ran into quite a bit of deadly trouble on the road. As a night watchman, Jack's primary job was to blow the warning horn in his tower to summon the actual town guard if a threat appeared. Jack grunted as the gate swung open. Nah, everything is quiet here. That lazy bum Paul is still snoring up in the tower. He rubbed his freezing hands together. He had forgotten his thick gloves upstairs, and the icy wind was already making his fingers go numb. He just wanted to get back to his warm fire. Chris bid the guard farewell and led the massive white stag through the gates. The architectural style of Whitestone Town heavily resembled medieval Europe from Damien's past life, filled with sturdy brick and stone structures. The night streets were deserted and eerily quiet. The only signs of life came from a rowdy tavern a block away, its raucous noise echoing through the frosty air. The town wasn't very large. Before long, the sleigh pulled up in front of a quiet, two-story house. The building looked quite old, its grey-white brick walls weathered by time and the harsh northern elements. Before he passed away, my granduncle spent most of his time in the royal capital, Chris explained, digging a heavy iron key out of his coat. I only came by occasionally to dust the place. Lord Damien, feel free to head upstairs to the study. There are some books my granduncle left behind. Damien's interest piqued. He desperately hoped the deceased wizard's books would help him understand this world's unique magic system. Chris led Damien up the creaking stairs. The study wasn't large, a heavy oak desk and a reading chair took up most of the space. A single bookshelf stood to the right, holding about a dozen thick tomes. Damien pulled one down. It was the illustrated guide to magical creatures Chris had mentioned earlier. You can take the bedroom right next door, Chris offered. I'll go get the fires lit and tidy up. Damien thanked him and immediately opened the book. The creature descriptions were frustratingly brief, offering only a hand-drawn sketch and a vague summary of their abilities. Unsurprisingly, the illustrations were static. It seemed the books in this world didn't use magical moving photographs like the ones back home. He recognized several creatures that perfectly matched the magical beasts from his own world, such as mer people. However, the lore here was vastly different. While his world only had mer people with human torsos and fish tails, this world also documented horrifying fishmen with fish heads and human bodies that dominated the deep seas. He also found entries for the dragon serpent tree and the phantom demon, both of which matched his recent, violent encounters perfectly. Setting the bestiary aside, Damien inspected the rest of the shelf. Most were mundane travelogues, poetry collections, and history texts. Drawing his wand, Damien tapped the spines of the books he wanted. Geminio. He flawlessly cast the doubling charm, instantly creating exact, permanent physical copies of the texts so he could study them later without stealing Chris's family heirlooms. As he finished duplicating the books, he noticed a lone, dusty parchment scroll tucked away in the back corner. He unrolled it carefully. The header read, Iman's Basic Meditation Method. The scroll detailed a technique for training the human spirit through deep meditation. By continuously tapping into one's mental potential, a wizard could condense their spiritual energy into a vast internal reservoir, a sea of spirit. Over time, this process would permanently increase the total volume of magic power within the body. But most importantly, it allowed a wizard to construct a runic model directly within their mind. Casting runic magic normally involved two excruciatingly slow steps: condensing raw magic into physical runic script, and then guiding those scripts into a structured spell model. However, if a wizard mastered this meditation method and pre-built the runic model in their sea of spirit, the condensation step would happen instantaneously. A spell like Lightning Bolt required 32 individual runic scripts. Without this meditation technique, manually condensing those runes took Damien nearly 5 minutes. With it, he could instantly conjure the scripts and immediately move to guiding them into the spell matrix. The entire casting process would be reduced to a mere 10 seconds. Damien was overjoyed. He hadn't expected to solve the fatal flaw of runic magic this quickly. Salazar Slytherin was right, Damien thought, his mind racing. Meditation truly is the key to runic magic. However, this breakthrough only deepened his suspicions. If the meditation Salazar Slytherin had written about was actually this exact meditation method, where on earth did the Hogwarts founder learn it? Had Slytherin practiced it himself? Had he visited this world? Damien's curiosity about the founder's era burned brighter than ever. When he returned to Hogwarts, he was definitely going to tear the restricted section apart looking for clues. Since he had fully memorized the short scroll, Damien didn't even need to duplicate it. He carefully rolled the parchment back up and returned it to its rightful place on the shelf. 75 stones, unlock 1 bonus chapter. 150 stones, unlock 2 bonus chapters. 300 stones, unlock 3 bonus chapters. Chapter 11, The Dual World Slytherin 11. A night passed, and a weary Damien rubbed his throbbing temples. He had practiced Iman's basic meditation method all night long. Constructing runic script models within his mind was mentally taxing. Thanks to the meditation technique, he could finally perceive his sea of spirit, though right now, it felt completely parched and dried up. 4 glowing runic models floated in his empty mental reservoir. This was the entire harvest of his night's work. He estimated that with a normal wizard's natural daily recovery, he would only be able to construct about 4 of these a day. At that pace, it would take him 8 long days to finish the 32 scripts required for the lightning bolt spell. According to this world's terminology, those 4 runes officially made him a first-level wizard apprentice. He reached into his pocket, which had been magically enlarged with an undetectable extension charm, and pulled out 2 vials, a draught of peace and an invigoration draught. He poured the potions down his throat, a spicy, burning sensation echoing down his esophagus. A few moments later, the recovery speed of his sea of spirit spiked dramatically. Damien's face lit up with joy. The Hogwarts potions actually worked on this world's runic magic. He needed to test the exact effects. He pulled out another draught of peace and drank it first. After waiting a while, there was no change to his sea of spirit. Then, he downed another invigoration draught. Almost immediately, his mental recovery speed accelerated again. It's the invigoration draught, Damien realized. Not only did it affect his mental recovery, but the potion's effects could actually stack. Let's see your limits, he muttered. This time, Damien pulled out 5 more bottles of the invigoration draught. The scaling was obvious. A single bottle increased his recovery speed by roughly 20%. After downing 3 more, his recovery rate had fully doubled. Anything beyond that had no extra effect. So the absolute limit is 5 bottles, Damien concluded. He was thrilled, but his wallet ached. A single vial of high-grade invigoration draught cost almost 2 galleons back home. I wonder if Professor Snape has a more potent version brewed. Damien mumbled, suddenly missing his grumpy potions master. He spent the next hour testing every fatigue-relieving potion in his inventory. Finally, he discovered one more brew that directly impacted his sea of spirit. The Mandrake Restorative Draught instantly replenished 50% of his depleted mental energy. However, drinking it repeatedly within a single day carried toxic side effects, and each bottle cost nearly 10 galleons. He hadn't tested the exact duration of the invigoration draught yet, but Damien did some quick mental math. If he kept the draught's effects active and drank 1 Mandrake Restorative Draught daily, he could construct 10 runic models a day. At that rate, he would finish all 32 scripts for the lightning bolt spell in just 3 days. Throwing money at magic really was the fastest way to grow. A quiet knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Lord Damien? Lunch is ready. Damien blinked, realizing it was already noon. His stomach gave a loud rumble. I'll be right down. He quickly packed up the empty potion vials, leaving the desk spotless, and headed downstairs. He arrived just in time to see Tina carrying a steaming pot of stew out of the kitchen. The rich, savory aroma made his mouth water. After lunch, Damien turned to the blacksmith. Chris, do you know where I can find blue water flowers? The blue water flower was a key supplementary ingredient mentioned in Iman's basic meditation method. Applying its extracted juice during meditation would accelerate the expansion of the sea of spirit, allowing it to hold far more runic models. According to the scroll, constructing 128 runic models would elevate him to a second-level wizard apprentice. With his potion-chugging strategy, Damien estimated he could reach that rank in just 13 days. Blue water flowers are fairly common around here, Chris replied. They grow in the river just behind the house. But they usually bloom underwater, and the river is completely frozen solid right now. Damien was pleasantly surprised that such a crucial magical catalyst was just a common local weed. Thanking Chris for the meal, Damien grabbed his heavy winter cloak and headed out to harvest the flowers himself. The afternoon sky was clear and bright. Despite the heavy snow, the streets of Whitestone Town were bustling with pedestrians. He soon reached the back street and found the frozen river, its banks stretching about 10 meters apart. A sturdy stone bridge sat off to his right. With a flick of his wrist, his wand slid smoothly from his sleeve into his palm. He pointed it directly at the thick ice. Conf Ringo. The blasting curse shattered the frozen surface with a deafening crack, exposing the rushing, frigid water below. Up on the nearby stone bridge, a young man and woman paused at the sound of the explosion. The blonde woman had been walking with her head down, aggressively complaining to her partner. It must have been a wizard's doing. They never leave any physical clues behind. Her companion, a red-haired man with his hair tied in a loose ponytail, walked with his hands stuffed deep in his pockets. They'll slip up eventually, he drawled lazily. Sometimes, Having no clues is a clue in itself, Anna. Anna opened her mouth to argue, but the sudden explosion down by the river caught her attention. She frowned, spotting a young man standing on the riverbank with a wand. "Captain Watson, look down there," she murmured. "I don't recognize that wizard." Captain Watson turned, his lazy demeanor vanishing as he studied the boy. "Indeed," he noted, his eyes narrowing. "We've been stationed in Whitestone Town for a while now. We know every local spellcaster. A strange wizard appearing out of nowhere right now is highly suspicious." Giving Anna a subtle nod, the captain turned and marched down toward the riverbank. Down by the shattered ice, Damien pushed a thread of his magic directly into the frigid water to scan the riverbed. It was a crude sensory technique he had recently developed, as liquid was incredibly easy to permeate with magical energy. Finding no immediate threats lurking below, he prepared to wade in. Suddenly, the crunch of snow caught his attention. He looked up to see a man and a woman approaching him. Wizards, Damien realized, his brow furrowing. He could feel the distinct, heavy fluctuations of magic radiating from both of them. This was his first time encountering native spellcasters in this dimension. He turned to face them, his grip on his wand tightening beneath his cloak. As the pair stopped a few paces away, a faint yellow light flickered in their eyes, some sort of local appraisal spell. They quickly scanned his magical signature, silently confirming his rank in their system, a first-level wizard apprentice. The red-haired man spoke first. "Sir, we are court wizards. We'd like to ask you a few questions." Damien gave a curt nod, signaling them to continue. "Are you new to Whitestone Town?" Watson asked smoothly. "We haven't seen you around here before." "I arrived last night," Damien answered truthfully. The two court wizards exchanged a quick, meaningful glance. "Did you happen to see the night watchman at the gate when you arrived?" Watson pressed. Damien nodded. "I spoke to one. He mentioned his partner was asleep inside the watchtower." "The night watchman from the gate went missing last night," Watson said, his tone turning authoritative. "We're going to have to ask you to come down to the security office to cooperate with our investigation." Damien's eyes narrowed. "That has nothing to do with me." He clearly remembered the guard shivering in his thick cap. When Chris had said goodbye, the man had eagerly mentioned going back to his warm fire, likely heading to the tavern as soon as his shift ended. Beside the captain, Anna was losing her patience. She didn't believe they would get straight answers out of a suspect by just talking. The timing of this stranger's arrival was far too coincidental. Furthermore, he was only a measly first-level wizard apprentice. It would be much easier to just apprehend him now and force the answers out of him later. Without warning, Anna raised her right hand. A magical ring on her index finger flared with a sickly green light, and a thick, thorny vine shot directly toward Damien. 75 stones, unlock 1 bonus chapter. 150 stones, unlock 2 bonus chapters. 300 stones, unlock 3 bonus chapters. Chapter 12, The Dual World Slytherin 12. Seeing Anna act so rashly, Captain Watson slapped his forehead. He felt a headache coming on. Rookies were truly difficult to manage. The moment Anna raised her hand, Damien quickly condensed the runic scripts through the model in his sea of spirit. A translucent circular barrier flared to life in front of Damien, violently deflecting the incoming vines. Damien was using the shield charm. Or rather, he was disguising the shield charm as runic magic. He had no intention of exposing his otherworldly magic to these two native wizards. Instead, he used the runic scripts condensed from his magic power to feign a local spell casting sequence, while silently casting Protego underneath the visual cover. The magic he had mastered at Hogwarts operated in a completely different way from runic magic. Using it openly would instantly expose him as an anomaly. Thanks to the meditation method, condensing runic scripts no longer took much time. He was now able to project the scripts while simultaneously casting his own magic using silent spell casting techniques. However, he couldn't cast every spell silently just yet. For advanced magic, like the Killing Curse or Fiend Fire, he still needed to speak the incantations. As for the wand in his hand, he wasn't afraid of it drawing suspicion. He had seen in Chris's memories that the weapons used by wizards in this world were varied and strange. A simple wooden stick wouldn't attract any unwanted attention. After being deflected, the thorny vines relentlessly whipped around the outer layer of the shield charm, attempting to constrict and shatter the barrier. Damien reacted instantly. A sharp, transparent, arc-shaped blade of wind shot from the tip of his wand, cleanly severing the writhing vines. Having finished her initial attack, Anna was already preparing her next spell. 22 runic scripts condensed rapidly between her hands. She intended to use a strong petrification spell to lock Damien down. But Damien didn't give her the chance. The moment the vines were cut, he silently cast a transfiguration spell, aiming directly at the ground beneath Anna's feet. At that moment, they were both standing on the frozen surface of the river. The thick ice beneath Anna instantly liquefied back into rushing water. With a yelp, she plunged straight into the freezing river. Captain Watson's eyes narrowed dangerously. Anna was a second-level wizard apprentice, and he had not expected her to be completely suppressed so quickly. The wizard before him had an extremely fast casting speed and razor-sharp combat awareness. His timing was impeccable. There was no way this boy was just a first-level wizard apprentice. He must have practiced a specialized technique to disguise the true depth of his sea of spirit. Watson drew the long sword from his waist. He possessed the strength of a third-level wizard apprentice and had already undergone 2 physical bloodline modifications. He was a melee-type wizard, and he was ready to fight. "Link! Stop!" a panicked voice shouted from the riverbank. "Why are you fighting Lord Damien?" Link Watson froze, his sword half raised. He looked toward the riverbank in shock. "Chris? When did you get to Whitestone Town?" Chris was his cousin. Link's grandfather, Old Watson, was Chris's great-uncle. "Just yesterday," Chris said, hurrying over to the river. "Lord Damien travelled to Whitestone Town with us. We were attacked on the road. Lord Damien is the only reason Tina and I are still alive. Is there some misunderstanding here?" Anna, who had just managed to haul herself out of the freezing river, collapsed onto the unbroken ice in a disheveled heap. She was soaked to the bone, her lips turning purple as violent shivers racked her body. "Is that so? Then we made a terrible mistake," Link said, immediately sheathing his long sword. He stripped off his heavy coat and draped it tightly over Anna's trembling shoulders. "The night watchman went missing last night, and we were just about to invite Lord Damien back to the station for questioning." Link reached into his pocket and pulled out a brilliant, glowing sapphire. "Lord Damien, I am incredibly sorry. We made a grave error. Anna is a new investigator, and I apologize for her impulsiveness." He offered the sapphire to Damien, his expression deeply sincere. "Please accept this as an apology. This sapphire stores a mage armor spell. Once activated, it can entirely block one attack from anything below the level of a formal wizard." Seeing that Link's attitude was genuine and deciding that he could use the captain to make further contact with the local wizarding circle, Damien accepted the gem. Chris looked at his cousin in confusion. "Since you've returned to Whitestone Town, why aren't you staying at our great-uncle's house?" "I'm staying at Anna's place," Link explained. Anna was a local, she and Link were fellow townsfolk, and he had taken great care of her when they were training in the royal capital. "We actually came back to investigate our grandfather's disappearance," Link continued, his tone turning grim. "The situation is complicated. After leaving behind a will, our grandfather left the royal capital. We tracked his movements to Whitestone Town. His ultimate goal was the Winter Forest." Link sighed. He was very old, and his magical strength had declined significantly over the last 2 years. He wasn't the wizard he used to be. So, after arriving in Whitestone Town, he hired a few local helpers for the expedition. They ventured into the winter forest, but in the end, only one of the helpers returned. Chris's face paled in shock. Missing? But the letters you sent said that our great-uncle had passed away. That was how he arranged it in his will, Link said softly. He specifically instructed that the house in Whitestone Town should be left to you. Chris's eyes reddened. His grandfather was old Watson's elder brother. Ever since Chris's father and grandfather passed, old Watson had always looked out for him. And now, the old man had even left him a house. Did you find any clues? Chris asked thickly. Not long after the expedition, the sole survivor also vanished. They disappeared right from their own home, leaving absolutely no traces behind, Link said, his frustration evident. The disappearance of the night watchman last night is highly suspicious. Again, there were no traces left at the scene. I suspect these incidents are connected. Chris felt a heavy weight settle in his chest. When he had said goodbye to the night watchman last night, the man had happily talked about getting a warm drink at the tavern. He hadn't expected to hear he was missing the very next morning. Ordinary people in this world truly had no security. Fortunately, little Tina had the aptitude for magic. Old Watson had previously promised that once Tina turned 10, he would send her to the Northland United Wizard Academy in the royal capital to study. Thinking of this made Chris even sadder. Now, even a formal wizard like old Watson had vanished without a trace, his fate entirely unknown. If you notice any suspicious clues, come find me at the town hall. We need to head back now so Anna can warm up. Seeing his partner shivering violently beside him, Link decided to cut the conversation short. As court wizards on a patrol mission, Link and Anna were currently quartered at the town hall in the center of town. After the two investigators hurried away, Damien turned to Chris. Whitestone Town doesn't seem very safe either. You and Tina need to be extremely careful. Chris nodded grimly. He bid Damien farewell, explaining he needed to go to the market to buy ingredients for dinner. With the interruption finally over, Damien turned his attention back to the freezing river. Before wading into the icy depths, he tapped himself with his wand, casting an impervious charm to repel the water and a bubblehead charm to secure his breathing. Finally, he downed a vial of pepper-up potion to ward off the freezing chill. Once submerged, he quickly located the blue water flowers. They were a common underwater weed, growing in thick clusters in the silt at the bottom of the riverbed. According to the texts, they would quickly wither if removed from their natural environment, so they needed to be stored in water to stay fresh. The harvesting process went smoothly. He quickly gathered a massive bundle of the vibrant blue flowers, stuffing them all into his magically expanded pocket for storage. To avoid a wardrobe malfunction like the last time he transmigrated, Damien had permanently sewn his undetectable extension pouch into the lining of his Western-style vest. He wore the vest at all times now. Whenever necessary, he could simply use a transfiguration spell to change its outward style, keeping his inventory secure and incredibly convenient. 75 stones, unlock 1 bonus chapter. 150 stones, unlock 2 bonus chapters. 300 stones, unlock 3 bonus chapters. Chapter 13, The Dual World Slytherin 13 bonus. The next day, in the study, Damien sat at his desk, preparing to use the blue water flowers he had collected yesterday to aid his practice of Iman's basic meditation method. He pulled several flowers from the water basin on the table and tore the petals apart. A pale blue juice immediately oozed from the broken edges. The blue water flower had a remarkably high water content, he could squeeze quite a bit of liquid from a single petal. After repeating the process a few times, the glass beaker on his desk was filled with the glowing blue sap. Damien poured the juice into his hands and smeared it directly onto his forehead. He closed his eyes, calmed his mind, and began circulating the meditation technique. A few breaths later, the flower juice permeated his skin. An intense, icy coolness sank into his brain, instantly refreshing his spirit. Damien felt as if he were standing on a stormy beach, constantly being battered by heavy waves. But with every wave that struck him, his sea of spirit became wider and more solid. An hour later, the juice in the beaker was completely used up, and Damien's sea of spirit had stabilized considerably. He carefully sensed the internal changes and discovered that his total volume of magic power had actually increased slightly. Long-term use of the dark arts places an enormous burden on a wizard's spirit. This is precisely why dark wizards who frequently cast unforgivable curses slowly become paranoid, twisted, and insane. Before practicing this meditation method, Damien would feel completely mentally exhausted if he cast the killing curse just twice in a row. Now, after training his spirit, the burden of casting Avada Kedavra felt noticeably lighter. At this current rate of growth, Damien estimated that once he advanced to a second-level wizard apprentice, he would be able to cast the killing curse 3 times in a row without suffering any mental backlash. Opening his eyes, he quickly downed 5 vials of invigoration draft and returned to constructing runic script models in his mind. After yesterday's tests, he had determined that the effects of 5 stacked invigoration drafts lasted for exactly 8 hours. This meant that to maintain double the recovery speed of his sea of spirit around the clock, he would need to consume 15 invigoration drafts every single day. It was a staggering expense. The cost of 1 high-grade invigoration draft was close to 2 galleons, bringing his daily potion budget to 30 galleons. Fortunately, Damien had frequently sold his own masterful brews under the pseudonym Gelman over the past 2 years, saving up quite a fortune. Combined with the massive estate he had inherited from his late grandfather, he could easily maintain this burn rate for the short term. Moreover, practicing the meditation method didn't always require consuming spiritual power to build runic models. According to the scroll, once he advanced to a 3rd-level wizard apprentice, his training would shift away from rapid construction and focus more on the slow, natural accumulation of the sea of spirit. At that point, chugging invigoration drafts would no longer be necessary. An hour later, Damien drank a mandrake restorative draft, instantly restoring 50% of his depleted spiritual power. He had only been practicing the meditation method for 2 days, but with the combined brute force of the invigoration and mandrake potions, he had already successfully constructed 20 runic script models in his mind. He was prioritizing the specific runes required for the lightning bolt spell. Casting lightning bolt required a sequence of 32 runic scripts, but many of the symbols repeated within the spell matrix. In reality, he only needed to memorize and construct 18 unique scripts. Wanting to test if the spell was finally viable for actual combat, Damien decided to take a break. He cast the disillusionment charm on himself, turning completely invisible, and slipped out of Whitestone Town, heading toward the quiet woods bordering the settlement. After walking for a while, he found a suitable target, a massive, ancient tree with a trunk so thick it would take 3 grown men to encircle it. Tapping into the pre-built models in his sea of spirit, Damien instantly condensed the required 32 runic scripts into his palm. He immediately began guiding them into the structural framework of the lightning bolt spell. Zzzzz. Blinding white light erupted from Damien's hand. The runic scripts rapidly fused together, transforming into a violent bolt of jagged lightning that shot toward the massive tree. The instant the lightning struck the trunk, the point of impact generated immense heat, instantly vaporizing the moisture inside the wood. When the blinding flash faded, a perfectly circular, charred hole had been blown clean through the center of the massive trunk. The raw power was staggering, even stronger than his blasting curse or severing charm. Damien also realized that Iman's basic meditation method didn't just speed up casting, it amplified the output. Thanks to his expanded sea of spirit, the destructive power of the lightning bolt had increased by 20%. The time it took to guide the runic scripts into the spell model was exactly 8 seconds. It was slow, but officially usable in actual combat. Satisfied with the test, Damien recast his disillusionment charm and headed back to Whitestone Town. As he passed through the gates, he noticed that the night watchman in the tower was an unfamiliar face, and the local militia had stationed 2 additional armed guards at the entrance. Upon returning to Chris's residence, Damien brushed the snow off his cloak and prepared to head upstairs. "Lord Damien!" Chris called out from the kitchen. "Madame Alsha from Whitestone Manor just sent over a dinner invitation for you." Damien paused on the stairs, confused. "Madame Alsha? She arrived from the royal capital about 6 months ago," Chris explained, wiping his hands on an apron. "She is the administrative officer for the court wizards in this region." Chris lowered his voice slightly. "It is said she is incomparably beautiful. Her looks have driven countless men to obsession. She is the constant topic of conversation here in Whitestone Town. If you go to the tavern on East Street, her beauty is all anyone talks about." Chris pointed toward the window. Whitestone Manor was originally the estate of the former town mayor. The rumors say he was so deeply infatuated with Madame Alsha that he gifted the entire manor to her shortly after she arrived. Damien took the invitation from Chris. It was exquisitely crafted from heavy parchment, the edges embroidered with a delicate flower resembling a bird's tail feather. Damien recognized it from one of the botany books he had duplicated in the study. It was a red iris. In this world, the red iris symbolized fleeting love. Its blooming period was incredibly short. It generally opened in the evening and completely withered away by the very next morning. Damien opened the letter. "Lord Damien, I will be hosting a dinner banquet at Whitestone Manor on Friday evening, inviting the young talents of Whitestone Town. I hope you can grace us with your presence at this grand gathering. I look forward to spending a wonderful time with you on this charming night. Alsha." Damien's brow furrowed in bewilderment. He didn't know this Madame Alsha at all, yet he had received a highly personalized dinner invitation. A sharp, calculating glint flashed deep in his eyes. He had only been in Whitestone Town for a few days. He wasn't very familiar with Link and Anna yet, so it was highly unlikely the two court wizards had recommended him to their superiors so quickly. Perhaps his brief skirmish by the frozen river yesterday had attracted the attention of someone observant. Regardless, he decided to accept the invitation. If it was a trap set by an enemy, ignoring the invitation wouldn't make the threat go away. But if it wasn't an enemy, he could use Madame Alsha's banquet to integrate himself into Whitestone Town's local circle of wizards. His primary goal in this dimension was to connect with native spellcasters. He needed more runic magic, more meditation methods, and a deeper understanding of this world's lore. Friday evening. Whitestone Manor. The manor was situated in the affluent suburbs northwest of Whitestone Town. It was surrounded by a lush, sprawling garden where hundreds of blooming red iris flowers looked like a beautiful, vibrant painting brought to life by the fading rays of the setting sun. The edge of the garden bordered a wide river that connected directly to the waterway running through Whitestone Town. Unlike the town, however, the water here wasn't frozen. The rushing current added a touch of lively vitality to the serene estate. Inside the manor, an impeccably dressed butler stopped outside a set of heavy oak doors and knocked twice. "Come in," a voice answered. It was soft and melodious, like heavenly music. The butler opened the door and stepped into a lavish dressing room. A woman with long, cascading chestnut hair sat perfectly upright before an ornate vanity mirror. Two busy maids stood behind her, carefully adjusting her jewelry and applying the final touches to her makeup. The butler stood behind her with his head respectfully bowed, though his peripheral vision caught half of her face reflected in the polished glass. In the mirror, her crimson lips were slightly parted, revealing a hint of seductive, dangerous charm. The line of her jaw was elegantly smooth, like a masterfully carved work of art. "Madam," the butler said softly. "The banquet is ready." She didn't turn around. "Is anyone absent?" she asked, her voice light. "Everyone has arrived." She nodded slowly. In the mirror, the slight, sharp curve of her lips outlined her sensuality and her deadly anticipation. 75 stones, unlock 1 bonus chapter. 150 stones, unlock 2 bonus chapters. 300 stones, unlock 3 bonus chapters. Chapter 14, The Dual World Slytherin 14. Damien arrived at Whitestone Manor precisely on time. He wore a sharp, black double-breasted suit that he had transfigured himself, using the dress and etiquette book from Chris's study as a reference. A localized warming charm? Damien wondered as he stepped onto the grounds. The environment here was completely different from the freezing town outside. The air was pleasantly warm, carrying the sweet fragrance of the blooming red iris flowers that filled the garden. There wasn't a single trace of the harsh northern winter to be found. Damien handed his invitation to the attendant waiting at the door. The man glanced at the name, pressed a hand to his chest in a respectful bow, and stepped aside. "Lord Damien, please come inside." The attendant led Damien down a small pebble path lined with intricately carved brickwork. Passing through the grand porch, an exquisite fountain came into view, its surrounding flower beds completely overflowing with red irises. "Lady Alsha really loves her irises," Damien noted silently. The main banquet hall sat just beyond the fountain. Surprisingly, the layout felt remarkably cozy. Huge, warm-colored chandeliers hung from the ceiling, their designs elegant but devoid of flamboyant, excessive carvings. Long rectangular tables were scattered across the room, piled high with gourmet food and fine wines. To the right, a live band played soft, relaxing music for the mingling guests. It was a stark contrast to Damien's recent summer vacation back home. He had attended an enrollment dinner at Malfoy Manor for young Draco, and the Malfoy family's decorations had been entirely focused on showing off their obscene wealth and luxury. The hall was already bustling with guests holding wine glasses and chatting in small groups. Stretching out his magical perception, Damien realized that a large portion of the attendees were wizards. Unlike the hidden magical communities back in his world, the spellcasters here didn't hide from ordinary people. The Blizzard Kingdom was a country openly ruled by magic, with the court wizards acting as the true governing authority. "Lord Damien," a familiar voice called out. Damien turned to see a very surprised Captain Link Watson approaching him. Link had entirely shed his usual lazy temperament. His tall, athletic figure was clad in a sharply tailored suit, making him look alert and energetic. Anna stood beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. She wore a dazzling, sweeping gown that caught the chandelier's light perfectly. Seeing the shock on the captain's face, Damien offered a slight smile. "I received a personal invitation from Lady Alsha as well." Link blinked in astonishment. Damien had only been in Whitestone Town for a matter of days. Earning an invitation from the manor's master that quickly was unheard of. "Did you know Lady Alsha before coming here?" Link asked. Damien shook his head. "No. As I mentioned, I am a wandering, reclusive wizard. I just arrived in town and have never met her." Link easily accepted the lie. It wasn't uncommon for reclusive wizards to awaken their magic by accidentally stumbling across an ancient inheritance, leaving them disconnected from formal magical society. "Lady Alsha is an adjutant to the court wizards and is incredibly famous among our generation," Link explained eagerly. "Through her, you can easily integrate into the proper magical circles. Come, I'll introduce you." Since Damien had saved the lives of his cousin Chris and little Tina, Link had a very favorable impression of the young wizard. He genuinely wanted to help Damien establish himself. Furthermore, Lady Alsha had a blindingly bright future. Link fully expected her to be promoted back to the royal capital very soon. Link led Damien toward the center of the hall, where the master of the manor was holding court. Lady Alsha wore a stunning, creamy white gown tailored in a classic aristocratic style, its sweeping hem decorated with intricate lace pleats. The boat neckline perfectly framed her elegant neck, its edges embroidered with delicate patterns that resembled a sea of snow-colored spring flowers. Her long, chestnut hair was styled into careful waves that cascaded over her bare shoulders. Pure white evening gloves stretched past her elbows, adding a touch of refined gentleness to her striking appearance. "Lady Alsha, you look as radiant as ever," Link complimented with a sincere bow. "Thank you for the kind words, Captain," Alsha replied, her smile bright. "I hope you all have a wonderful time tonight." Her voice was soft, melodic, and entirely captivating. Noticing that her emerald eyes had shifted to Damien, Link quickly stepped aside. "My lady, please allow me to introduce you. This is Lord Damien, an exceptionally skilled wizard who recently arrived in town." Damien offered a flawless, aristocratic bow. "Lady Alsha, you are undoubtedly the most brilliant pearl in the room tonight. It is an honor to finally meet you." Her smile deepened, turning both elegant and knowing. "Thank you for the praise, Lord Damien. One of my subordinate officials happened to witness your brief scuffle with Anna by the river yesterday." She smoothly explained the mystery of his invitation. "To be so young yet possess such extraordinary combat instincts, you are a truly promising talent." "Dasanayaki," Alsha called out softly, summoning a passing waiter. She made it a point to memorize the name of every servant in her manor. "Lord Damien is my honored new guest. See to it that he is well entertained, and ensure his glass is never empty." Damien smoothly lifted a crystal goblet of wine from the servant's silver tray, offering Alsha a charming smile and thanks. Just then, a well-dressed butler with graying hair approached the group. "Miss," he murmured respectfully. "All the guests for the evening have arrived. Shall we officially begin the banquet?" This man wasn't the original steward of Whitestone Manor. He was a loyal confidant who had followed Alsha from the royal capital, stepping into the role of head butler the moment the former mayor gifted her the estate. Because of their long history, he along with several of her older servants was accustomed to calling her Miss rather than her formal titles. Alsha nodded to the butler before turning back to Damien. She gracefully extended her gloved right hand. "Lord Damien, the banquet is about to begin. Would you do me the honor of sharing the opening dance?" Damien gladly accepted. It was standard aristocratic social behavior, after all. He gently took her long, slender fingers in his own. "It would be my absolute privilege, my lady." Fortunately, the dress and etiquette book had described this dimension's social dances in great detail, and he had practiced the steps a few times in his study before leaving. Besides, in his current life at Hogwarts, Damien had attended countless pure-blood high society galas. He could navigate these lavish social minefields with effortless calm, something his past life self would have completely failed at. The band abruptly stopped their background music. Recognizing the cue, the guests mingling in the center of the hall respectfully scattered to the edges. Alsha led Damien straight to the center of the cleared dance floor, instantly making them the focal point of the entire room. As a sweeping, atmospheric waltz began to play, Damien extended his arm. Alsha rested her hand in his palm. Even through the fabric of her white glove, he could feel a delicate softness, like touching spun silk. They moved together in perfect sync, executing an elegant three-step turn. Alsha's heavy skirt fluttered gracefully, carving beautiful arcs through the air. As he guided her through the rotations, he studied her closely. Her curled chestnut hair bounced gently against her fair shoulders with every step. Even at such an intimate distance, Damien couldn't find a single flaw on her face. Her jawline was perfectly defined, her facial contours striking and elegant. Her large, bright emerald eyes revealed a sharp, captivating spirit. With her straight nose and full, crimson lips curved into a warm smile, she looked breathtaking. It was as if time had frozen for her at the age of 18, immortalizing her like a young maiden in a classical oil painting. 75 stones, unlock 1 bonus chapter. 150 stones, unlock 2 bonus chapters. 300 stones, unlock 3 bonus chapters. Chapter 15, The Dual World Slytherin 15. The music shifted to a gentle melody, the dance was drawing to its close. Alsha finished her last spin, her left hand resting on Damien's shoulder as she leaned back against him. Damien raised his left hand high, their fingers interlaced, while his right arm curled lightly around her slender waist. They froze in the final pose. Damien was so close to Alsha that he caught the faint, intoxicating scent of red irises in her hair. Time itself seemed to slow. In a dark corner of the hall, a young man in a deep purple coat wore a twisted expression. A false smile lingered on his lips, but thick veins throbbed visibly at his temples. Lady Alsha was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. From his very first glimpse, he had been hopelessly captivated. Everything had been going so smoothly. After learning she loved red iris flowers, he had ordered exotic seeds from the south and even hired a skilled wizard apprentice to cultivate them. He had won her favor. She had even personally sent him a bouquet of the newly bred flowers. But his joy was short-lived. His father, the former mayor, that wretched old wight, had also fallen for her after a single meeting. The old man had actually presented her with the grand estate that their white family had held for generations. The geezer actually thought he could steal his Alsha. Only he was worthy of Lady Alsha's favor. Her beauty, her wealth, her status, everything should be his. Their children would be the ones to inherit her title. Fortunately, that old obstacle was no more. A cold, murderous glint flashed in his eyes. "Sir, sir, sir," a timid voice called softly, snapping him back to reality. A young waiter holding a silver tray was staring in horror at the blood dripping from his hand. "Sir, do you need help?" Jack had crushed his wineglass in his grip. Jagged shards of crystal had sliced his palm open, and blood was running freely down his wrist. Jack drew a slow, trembling breath and plastered that same false smile back onto his face. "Lady Alsha's dancing is simply so exquisite that it carries one away. I was quite overcome. Could I have another glass?" "Thank you." "Just another fool bewitched by her," the waiter thought, forcing a polite smile as he quickly replaced the drink. When the music finally ended, a wave of applause surged through the hall. The guests clapped enthusiastically. Jack drained the fresh glass in one gulp, handed it back to the waiter, and joined the applause. Back on the dance floor, Damien tightened his right arm and smoothly lifted Alsha back upright. Once steady, she beamed at him. "Lord Damien, I never knew we moved so well together." Damien smiled gently. "Lady Alsha, your skill is simply superb. Just listen to that applause. Every gentleman here is wishing they could finish the dance in my place." Her smile widened. She leaned in dangerously close to his ear, so close that Damien could feel the warmth of her breath. "After the banquet," she whispered softly, her breath tickling his skin like an early summer breeze. "Come find me in the back garden." With that cryptic invitation, she gracefully slipped away. The words left Damien puzzled, but Alsha was already mingling with the other guests, offering absolutely no further explanation. "There's no way. I haven't got a single drop of Vila blood in me," Damien muttered inwardly. Yet her invitation sounded anything but innocent. He exhaled slowly. Alsha was undeniably alluring. Her charm was so potent it almost felt like Vila magic. But he would see what game she was playing. He wasn't particularly worried. Before arriving at the manor, he had secretly crafted a porte-clés just in case things went south. Damien lifted a fresh glass from a passing tray and took a sip. The pale gold wine tasted just like high-end champagne. Glass in hand, he strolled back toward Link and Anna. Link laughed as he approached. "Not bad at all. So, have you felt Lady Alsha's legendary charm yet?" "She is captivating, and she dances superbly," Damien answered with a polite smile. Link clinked his glass against Damien's and downed his drink. "Well, brace yourself. Here comes another girl. You won't be getting any rest tonight." Damien followed his gaze and spotted a fair-haired girl approaching them. She curtsied gracefully, lifting the edges of her skirts. "Young wizard, would you honor me with a dance?" Damien's magical perception confirmed no magical aura came from her. She was an ordinary human. He smiled warmly. "Of course." The banquet neared its end, and the band began to play their final piece. At last, Damien was free. Exactly as Link had predicted, eager partners had practically lined up for him. A fresh, handsome young wizard naturally drew intense curiosity, and many noble guests had actively sought introductions. Some bold girls had even slipped him secret notes, though every single one of them was non-magical. He had absolutely no intention of encouraging them. He was still a minor, and right now, his only priority was focusing on growing stronger. Ever since his parents were murdered by his Death Eater aunt, a deep, lingering sense of danger had haunted him. For 13 years, he had trained relentlessly, knowing with absolute certainty that the Dark Lord and his Death Eaters would eventually return. This alternate wizarding world offered endless new possibilities. When the Dark Lord finally came back, Damien fully intended to be strong enough to walk away alive. When the last chord faded, the guests began to take their leave. Damien discreetly asked an attendant to escort him to the back garden. He stepped out onto the gravel path once again. Faint, warm light glowed from the carved magical stones lining the walkway. In the center of the garden, a delicate fountain stood surrounded by beds of blooming red iris flowers. Just behind the fountain hung a vine-woven swing chair, fresh green leaves still curling naturally along its wicker frame. Alsha sat there quietly. She was no longer wearing her lavish courtly gown, but rather a simple, pale dress that lent her an entirely different kind of charm. If she had been a dazzling, unapproachable rose during dinner, right now, she looked like a fresh, delicate jasmine. 75 stones, unlock 1 bonus chapter. 150 stones, unlock 2 bonus chapters. 300 stones, unlock 3 bonus chapters. Chapter 16, The Dual World Slytherin 16 bonus. Outside the manor, 2 hooded figures lurked among the trees. The one leaning against a trunk was only about a meter tall, while the other sat perched on a nearby boulder. The man on the stone crossed his arms. The client says he's only a first-level wizard apprentice. I don't think we need to waste a spell trap on him. The short one propped against the tree shook his head. This client is extremely generous. The kid might be hiding his true strength, it's better to be safe than sorry. When he heads back to Whitestone Town, he'll have to take this road. Once he triggers the trap, even if he's stronger than he looks, he won't be able to fly away. After a pause, the seated man added, the banquet ended an hour ago, and he still hasn't come out. Our target is probably still cozying up with Lady Alsha. Suddenly, the dwarf cut in. He's coming. Down the path, a black-haired teen with natural curls stepped out of the manor's grand gates. The man on the stone leapt up. He was over 2 meters tall, yet as thin as a bamboo pole. He peered toward the gate. So he really is leaving. I thought he might stay the night. The short wizard hissed, shut it. He's heading this way. But moments later, something unexpected happened. The 2 assassins watched as their target veered off the road and headed into the woods on the opposite side. The dwarf's face darkened. Why is he going into the trees over there? There's no way he spotted us from that distance. He isn't even a formal wizard. The tall, skinny wizard frowned. What now? Do we keep waiting? Thinking of the massive reward, the dwarf clenched his teeth. No more waiting. We strike together. Even if he turns out to be a third-level wizard apprentice, he won't live to see morning. Damien adjusted his collar as he stepped out of the manor's back garden. The great hall was already empty, the long tables of food and wine completely cleared away. Back in the garden, Lady Alsha had chatted with him for ages, so long, in fact, that it had almost felt like a date. Before he left, she had formally invited Damien to join her private exchange circle. Since arriving in Whitestone Town, Lady Alsha had organized a monthly gathering for local wizards to share information and trade rare resources. Her invitation had been so unabashedly flirtatious that Damien had almost wondered if he had Vela blood. It was incredibly easy to misread her intentions. Stepping outside the gates, he looked for a secluded patch of woods so he could apparate away. He had already tested and confirmed that both apparition and portrait creation worked perfectly in this dimension. However, after taking just a few steps, his eyes narrowed. Through his raw magical senses, he could feel two wizards lurking in the woods to his right. The main road to Whitestone Town split the forest in two, with a matching stand of trees lying on the left. To avoid unnecessary trouble, Damien casually slipped into the left-hand woods. Yet the moment he entered the tree line, he sensed the two wizards moving to follow him. Damien frowned. Whoever they were definitely here for him. With a flick of his wrist, his wand slid smoothly into his hand. Disillusionment, he whispered, the charm washing over him like cold water as he vanished completely from sight. A moment later, the tall and short figures skidded to a halt in the clearing behind him. The lanky wizard cursed. "Damn it, he's gone!" A sharp whistle suddenly split the air. The short wizard frantically rolled aside as a translucent severing charm scythed past where his neck had just been. Heart pounding, the dwarf realized how close the wind-like blade had come. "He spotted us," he muttered in shock. "But how? Only formal wizards possess true magic perception." "He's too young to be a formal wizard," the tall one argued. "He must have a detection magical artifact." Greed flashed in his eyes. Such artifacts fetched astronomical prices on the black market. He plunged his hand into his robes and produced a fist-sized, crystalline eyeball. Reveal. The eyeball floated into the air, pulsing with a sickly red light. The artifact was designed to strip away any invisibility in the immediate vicinity. A heavy ripple of foreign magic washed over Damien, forcibly unraveling his disillusionment charm. He snapped back into view. While the eyeball was rising, the dwarf had already begun his incantation. A translucent blue arrow materialized between his hands, his signature first circle spell, the Ice Burst Arrow. The exact moment Damien reappeared, the dwarf finalized the spell model and flung the spear-thick shaft of solid ice directly at his chest. Prodigo. Damien snapped his wand up. A translucent, dome-like shield charm flared to life in front of him. The ice arrow punched through almost instantly, shattering the magical shield like glass. Damien dove sharply forward. The icy bolt schemed inches over his head and exploded violently behind him, spraying jagged spikes of frost in every direction. In his left hand, Damien clenched the sapphire Link had given him. With a single thought, he activated it, instantly triggering the stored mage armor. The gem flared brightly, then dulled to clear glass as the spell deployed. Glowing, hexagonal plates of magical force snapped into place around Damien, effortlessly deflecting every single flying ice spike. Seeing the sheer destructive power of their local spells, Damien decided it was time to end this quickly. A winter forest was the absolute perfect environment for advanced transfiguration. He targeted a massive, ancient oak tree that would take 4 men to encircle. With a sharp slash of his wand, the heavy trunk violently twisted. Thick branches split and rapidly wove together, forming 2 massive, wooden arms. The Treant Guardian was inspired by a video game from his past life. Normally, it would just hurl heavy stones or smash enemies with its giant fists. However, winter had left this tree completely bare of leaves, giving Damien another idea. He aimed his wand at a neighboring pine tree, transfiguring its trunk into a colossal wooden broadsword. The newly animated Treant Guardian hefted the massive blade and stepped forward, slamming it down toward the 2 assassins. Their faces blanched in sheer terror. What kind of apprentice could do this? They had been completely lied to. The dwarf mentally cursed their client to the darkest pits of hell. No first-level apprentice could manage such godlike power. "Forget the bounty," he screamed, "run!" But the ground beneath them had already shifted. Thick, snake-like roots whipped out of the snow, coiling tightly around their ankles and pinning them in place. Trapped, the 2 assassins could only throw up desperate, glowing shield charms. The Treant's titanic sword smashed down with a deafening roar, obliterating their shields and hurling a massive geyser of snow and earth sky-high. A moment later, peaceful snowflakes drifted down through the sudden, bloody silence. 75 stones, unlock 1 bonus chapter. 150 stones, unlock 2 bonus chapters. 300 stones, unlock 3 bonus chapters. Chapter 17, The Dual World Slytherin 17 bonus. The drifting snow gradually settled back to the ground. Damien flicked his wand, and the colossal Treant Guardian retracted its wooden greatsword, leaving a massive, jagged slash mark deep in the earth. Nothing moved inside the gash. Through Damien's magical senses, the 2 wizards' magical pulses had gone completely silent. He stepped forward to survey the results of his attack, frowning at what he saw. Within the huge gouge, the pair's flesh had literally been crushed and merged with the frozen soil and snow. This was the first time he had used transfiguration in actual combat. Against a large, stationary target, its raw destructive power far exceeded his expectations. With a silent levitation charm, he carefully sifted through the bloody slush. Besides the wizard's mangled remains, he found only some twisted metal and a long, black finger bone. Scour Jiffy. The scouring charm washed the gore away. The bone remained pitch black, about 5 or 6 centimeters long. It was clearly non-human and practically pulsed with dense magic, another magical artifact. Searching the nearby snowdrift, he also recovered the eye-shaped artifact that had dispelled his invisibility. The Treant Guardian had miraculously avoided crushing it. Whitestone Manor lay dangerously close by. Damien guessed that Madame Alsha had already heard the commotion and would be sending people to investigate the scene at any moment. Working quickly, he reverted the massive treant and its wooden sword back into ordinary trees with a complex untransfiguration spell. He then cast a vanishing spell to completely erase the wizard's bloody remains. Finally, he used a sweeping levitation charm to flip the surrounding snow, burying the massive sword scar. He had left the manor only moments ago. Madame Alsha would surely guess he had been ambushed here, but this quick cover-up would keep anyone from pinning down exactly what kind of magic he had used. Once the battlefield was completely clean, Damien closed his eyes and operated straight home. Moments after Damien vanished, Madame Alsha and her grey-haired butler arrived at the edge of the forest. The butler produced a polished, disc-shaped artifact designed to detect lingering magical pulses. After a moment of scanning, he shook his head. There is no residual aura from Lord Damien or his ambushers. They have already left. Madame Alsha nodded slowly. Let's take a closer look. They soon reached the center of the battlefield. Even in the dark, it was obvious the snow here had been violently disturbed. The butler kept scanning with his disc. The snow is showing chaotic magical reactions. Someone used magic to rapidly sweep the battlefield clean. Alsha simply raised her right hand. A swirl of glowing, greenish wind gathered above her palm. With a gentle toss, the wind rapidly expanded, becoming a localized gale that violently pushed the top layer of snow aside. Moments later, Damien's massive, hastily buried gouge in the earth was revealed. The butler looked startled. Creating such a massive physical mark was no small feat. He stepped forward, using the disc to test the residual magic lingering in the frozen dirt. Strange, he muttered, his brow furrowing. The magical trace here is incredibly faint. This trench wasn't caused directly by a spell. Alsha knelt and pinched a clod of dirt from inside the trench. Even through her thick evening glove, she could feel that the soil was packed far denser than the surrounding earth. It gave her serious food for thought. Halfway along the gouge, the butler suddenly exclaimed, "Here! The aura is clear, 2 wizards. 1 second-level wizard apprentice, and 1 third-level wizard apprentice. The scent of blood is strongest here," Alsha concluded after examining the immediate area. They must have been gravely wounded or killed on this exact spot. After finishing his sweep of the perimeter, the butler stood up and summarized his findings. According to the readings, Lord Damien is at least a third-level wizard apprentice with formidable combat skills. He dispatched a second and a third-level attacker in a matter of minutes, completely erased the bodies, and left without a trace. So young, yet already a third-level wizard apprentice. Madame Alsha murmured, a dangerous, elegant smile touching her lips. A very fine specimen indeed. Back in his quiet study in Whitestone Town, Damien replayed the evening's events in his mind. He had left the manor at an entirely unpredictable hour, yet the ambushers had clearly been waiting for him. He didn't recognize the pair at all. Judging from their crude, straightforward methods, they were almost certainly hired blades. Since arriving in Whitestone Town, he had met very few people. Though he had briefly clashed with Link and Anna, they had made peace. There was absolutely no reason for the court wizards to set assassins on him. Therefore, the instigator was almost certainly someone who had attended the banquet tonight. Madame Alsha had many admirers. Her subtle, intimate gestures on the dance floor, combined with her whispered invitation to the back garden, had not gone unnoticed. The keen eyes of the nobility at the banquet had likely seen everything. But would one of her jealous suitors really go so far as to hire killers over a single dance? If Alsha was as perceptive as she seemed, she would undoubtedly know exactly which of her devotees was capable of such an extreme reaction. Had she deliberately drawn that hatred toward him? If so, why? To use an assassin to test his true strength? There were simply too many questions and too little understanding of Alsha's true motives. Information in this world was scarce, so Damien decided to shelve the problem for now. He needed to focus on his own growth. He turned his attention to his spoils, the eyeball-sized orb and the pitch-black finger bone. He tried the eye first. A simple, straightforward infusion of his magic easily activated the artifact, confirming it was a localized invisibility dispeller. The finger bone, however, proved trickier. No method he tried could rouse a reaction from it. Finally, he decided to channel runic magic into it, attempting to cast lightning bolt. The moment he did, he noticed that the guidance stage of the spell matrix accelerated significantly. Previously, shaping the spell model had required 8 seconds. With the black bone in his hand, the guidance phase was shortened to just 6 seconds, a massive 25% reduction in casting time. Further tests confirmed that the passive acceleration effect persisted as long as he carried the bone on his person. After finishing his experiments, he pulled out the protective gem Link had given him by the river. The stored mage armor had been entirely expended during the fight, leaving behind a dull, colorless crystal. Damien remembered reading in Chris's study that these gems were called monastones. Using a specialized magic stone engraving technique, a wizard could burn runic magic directly into them for single-use storage. More importantly, monastones also served as physical vessels for holding raw magical energy. Curious, he channeled his own magic into the clear gem. Its color rapidly deepened until it turned a rich, vibrant sapphire blue once again. Once it was fully blue, it could absorb no more energy. Damien estimated its maximum capacity was roughly equal to the total mana pool of a first-level wizard apprentice. He realized that these monastones were invaluable. They were effectively rechargeable batteries for storing magic. Unfortunately, he lacked the alchemical formula to craft them from scratch. Monastones were highly complex alchemical products, not natural minerals he could just dig out of the ground. After inventorying the night's gains, he finally prepared to return to Hogwarts. Sensing the metal disc in his mind, he found that the crystal within was fully charged once more. Focusing his intent, he visualized the artifact spinning rapidly. In an instant, his study vanished, and he was plunged back into the familiar darkness of his Slytherin dormitory. His roommates, Jerry and Gerald, were still sleeping soundly. Knox dozed peacefully on the windowsill beneath the glass of the Black Lake. Because time had stopped in this dimension while he was gone, no one even suspected he had ever left. 75 stones, unlock 1 bonus chapter. 150 stones, unlock 2 bonus chapters. 300 stones, unlock 3 bonus chapters. Chapter 18, The Dual World Slytherin 18. Early in the morning, Damien woke up first. Jerry and Gerald were still fast asleep. He shook his roommates awake, changed his clothes, and headed to the bathroom to wash up. When he returned, he saw that Jerry and Gerald had immediately laid back down and fallen asleep again. He pulled out a Muggle alarm clock he had purchased over the summer. It was 7:50 a.m. Breakfast in the Great Hall ran from 8 until 9, with the first morning class starting right at 9. He set the alarm for 8:30, placed the clock on Jerry's nightstand, and quietly left the dormitory. As he crossed the Slytherin common room, a voice called out, "Good morning, Senior Damien." It was Griffin Everett, a second-year Slytherin. Griffin was a half-blood. The proportion of half-bloods in his year was quite low, making them frequent targets for Slytherin's pure-blood supremacists. Last semester, Damien had intervened in several bullying incidents. Being a half-blood himself, he refused to turn a blind eye, and Griffin was one of the students he had personally protected. "Good morning, Griffin," Damien replied smoothly. Griffin stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Senior Damien, I heard a rumor. During the summer holidays, Will Crabbe went around telling the upper years that you are the new king of Slytherin." Oh! Damien's interest was piqued. He had originally heard the ridiculous title from the Weasley twins on the Hogwarts Express. It turned out Will Crabbe was the one spreading it. Will Crabbe was one of Griffin's primary tormentors. Once, while harassing Griffin, Crabbe had loudly insulted all half-bloods. Damien had happened to walk by and promptly taught the boy a harsh, painful lesson. "He probably wants the upper years to target you because of the arrogant title," Griffin warned, looking anxious. "Be careful, Senior." Damien patted Griffin lightly on the shoulder. "Thanks for the information. I'll watch my back." In truth, Damien didn't care about Will's petty tricks. After fighting literal assassins in another dimension, these childish schoolyard feuds were just light entertainment. Damien smiled at the younger boy. "Want to head up and grab breakfast together?" Griffin gave an apologetic look. "I actually promised my girlfriend we'd eat together today." He had specifically waited in the common room just to warn Damien before heading up to the Ravenclaw Tower to meet her. Damien's smile twitched slightly. "All right then." He turned and headed to the Great Hall alone. "Kids these days are too precocious," Damien lamented inwardly. "Dating in their second year instead of studying hard. No wonder he can't beat Will Crabbe in a duel." When he reached the Great Hall, a decent number of students were already eating. Damien scanned the 4 long tables. Most of the first years were still in bed, but the Hufflepuffs were out in full force. Over at the Gryffindor table, Hermione Granger was the only first-year present, quietly eating her breakfast while reading a book. "Good morning, Damien." At the entrance, Damien bumped into Cedric Diggory. The Hufflepuff was a peer in his year and had ranked second overall in their previous academic term. "Morning, Cedric," Damien replied. "Didn't you come down with your roommates?" Slytherin and Hufflepuff shared charms class for their year. Cedric frequently asked Damien for advice on spellcasting, so the two were fairly well acquainted. Cedric chuckled, holding up a napkin filled with toast. "They couldn't get out of bed. I'm bringing some breakfast back up for them." Damien sighed enviously. "Can I switch dorms with them? Jerry and Gerald are useless." Cedric smiled brightly. "Professor Sprout would certainly be thrilled to have you. Maybe then it would finally be Hufflepuff's turn to win the House Cup." Ever since Damien became Snape's private assistant, the potions master called on him constantly during class. Damien strongly suspected Snape was just using him as an excuse to blatantly award Slytherin free house points. Damien bid Cedric farewell and headed to the Slytherin table. He ate quickly. Since it was still early, he decided to swing by the library before class. The Hogwarts Library, located on the second floor of the castle, housed tens of thousands of books on towering wooden shelves, accumulating over a millennium of magical knowledge. The librarian, Madame Pants, was already prowling the aisles. She was a thin, strict woman who looked remarkably like an undernourished vulture. She shot Damien a sharp glare, but seeing he wasn't a disruptive first year, she said nothing. "Good morning, Madam Pants," Damien greeted her politely. Madam Pants gave a stiff, expressionless nod. She severely disliked anyone making unnecessary noise in her domain. Damien headed straight for the historical manuscripts section, where the shelves were organized by era. He scoured the area but couldn't find a single text belonging to Salazar Slytherin. Frustrated, Damien approached the librarian's desk. "Madam Pants, does the library hold any original manuscripts by Salazar Slytherin?" Madam Pants stared down her long nose at him. "The original materials left by the 4 founders are securely kept in the restricted section. If you wish to consult them, you need a signed permission slip from a professor." "Thank you," Damien replied. He couldn't access the restricted section right now, but he figured he could easily get Snape to sign a slip for him after potions. With time to kill, he grabbed a random charm theory book off a nearby shelf and sat down to read until class started. "Potions class. Damien, answer this," Professor Snape drawled unhurriedly. "How does one properly extract the liquid from a salamander horn?" Damien answered without hesitation. "Soak the salamander horn in an infusion of wormwood for exactly 10 minutes, then remove it. Place it in a cauldron with powdered moonstone, crushed scarab beetles, and armadillo bile. Simmer over low heat for 15 minutes, then filter out the residue." Snape gave a stiff, approving nod. "Correct. 2 points to Slytherin." Similar scenes had already played out 3 times since class began. Snape was acting a bit unusual today. Normally, he only called on Damien once or twice per session to farm points. Snape swept back to his lectern, his black robes billowing. "Next is the practical application. I sincerely hope your summer holidays were not entirely wasted on frivolous pursuits." He scanned the dungeon with his dark, cold eyes. Several students immediately lowered their heads, too guilty or intimidated to meet his gaze. "This practical will be completed in groups of 3, Snape continued. "Damien, distribute the potion ingredients." At Snape's command, the Slytherin and Gryffindor students quickly scrambled to form their groups. Damien unlocked the student store cupboard in the corner and began passing out the salamander horns, moonstone, and scarab beetles to each table. Naturally, Damien partnered with his 2 roommates. Gerald was tasked with crushing the beetles, while Jerry ground the moonstone into a fine powder. Both boys looked completely relaxed, knowing Damien would flawlessly brew the actual potion. The Gryffindors at the adjacent tables were not nearly as lucky. Snape prowled through their aisles like a large bat, breathing down their necks. He stopped abruptly behind the table where Fred and George Weasley were working. Snape stared down at Fred with absolute disdain. "Perhaps you should clear the bezoars out of your head, Weasley. I distinctly recall saying the powdered moonstone and the scarabs were to be processed separately." 75 stones, unlock 1 bonus chapter. 150 stones, unlock 2 bonus chapters. 300 stones, unlock 3 bonus chapters. Chapter 19, The Dual World Slytherin 19. Professor Snape stood completely expressionless beside Damien's workbench, watching him brew. After the cauldron began emitting a thick, red steam, Damien skillfully turned off the heat and used a fine sieve to filter out the crushed residue. Finally, he poured the clear, perfectly brewed liquid into a new crystal phial. After Damien finished the final step, Professor Snape picked up the phial holding the salamander horn extraction and held it up to the dungeon's dim light. "Finished first. And flawlessly executed," Snape drawled, his voice carrying effortlessly across the silent classroom. 5 points to Slytherin. Professor Snape had successfully found yet another opportunity to award his own house points. He set the phial back down and swept toward the podium at the front of the room. 10 minutes left. Those who have not finished will copy the exact process for extracting salamander horn liquid 100 times. The students below panicked, frantically quickening their pace. But the rushing only caused them to make more and more mistakes, and Professor Snape's expression darkened visibly with every ruined cauldron. 10 minutes later, Professor Snape announced the end of class. Those who had managed to finish just in time breathed a heavy sigh of relief. Those who hadn't finished looked completely ashen. The thought of being punished with writing 100 lines by Professor Snape on the very first day of classes left them utterly dejected. After Damien stayed behind to help Professor Snape tidy up the classroom ingredients, he approached the professor's desk. "Professor, I've been researching ancient runes recently and would like to consult Salazar Slytherin's original manuscripts. I need your signature for a restricted section pass." Professor Snape paused, his dark eyes locking onto Damien. "Do not waste your talent, Damien. Spreading your energy too thin this early in your education is not a wise choice." Damien smoothly offered his pre-planned excuse. "You know, my grandfather was Alphard Black. He was a renowned scholar of ancient runes, and I have recently taken a deep interest in continuing his work." Snape stared at him for a long moment, but said nothing more. He pulled out a piece of parchment, sharply signed his name, and handed the permission slip over. Leaving the dungeons, Damien headed straight for the Great Hall. Potions had been his last class of the day, and it was finally time for dinner. Arriving at the Great Hall, he scanned the Slytherin table and spotted his roommates, who had saved a seat for him. As Damien sat down, he realized Jerry and Gerald were still gossiping about potions class. "Professor Snape seemed to be in a genuinely foul mood today," Jerry muttered, buttering a roll. "I think his glare is even more terrifying than last year." Gerald took a sip of black tea. "I just heard from Pansy Parkinson. Apparently, during the first-year potions class this morning, Snape deducted points from Harry Potter." Jerry's face filled with surprise. "You don't usually get points deducted just for failing to answer a question, even if you are a Gryffindor." Gerald shrugged carelessly. "Who knows? Perhaps Professor Snape just finds the Savior particularly disagreeable." Damien glanced over toward the Gryffindor table. He was mildly surprised to find Harry, Ron, Neville, and Hermione all sitting together. The four of them had seemingly become fast friends in just one day. Harry looked miserable, poking at his food. Thanks to him, Gryffindor had already lost house points in the very first week of school. The other three first years were leaning in, trying hard to comfort him. "The Golden Trio has assembled," Damien thought to himself, plus Neville. Turning back to his own table, Damien nudged Jerry. "Let me copy your charms homework for today." He couldn't be bothered to do the actual assignment. His magical progress was leagues ahead of the third-year curriculum, making standard homework completely useless for his growth. Jerry rolled his eyes. "The top student in the entire year actually wants to copy my homework." Gerald grinned around a mouthful of potatoes. "I'm going to copy it too. Rounding up, that means I'm officially tied for first place with Damien." Halfway through the meal, a small brown owl swooped into the Great Hall and dropped a letter directly onto Damien's plate. Damien took the envelope and offered the owl a piece of chicken. It was a letter from Luna Lovegood. In her uniquely looping handwriting, she asked how his first day of classes had gone, happily announced that the mistletoe by her front door had sprouted, and finally detailed exactly how many mealworms her baby Thunderbird had eaten that afternoon. Damien quickly drafted a reply on the back of his charms notes. He told Luna about the dramatic first-year feast, mentioned Snape's unusually foul mood, and finally recounted how he had bumped into the new Gryffindor first years on the Hogwarts Express. "Goodbye, Bobo," Damien said, handing the folded reply to the owl. The bird took the parchment in its beak and immediately took flight. Gerald watched the bird go, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "You and your neighbor sure have a cozy relationship. Ever since we started Hogwarts, you receive a letter from her every single week. What a good neighbor, eh?" Gerald suddenly scowled. "Hey! Why are you taking my food? Leave me a chicken wing." Damien calmly chewed the stolen chicken. "I thought you were full." After dinner, Damien headed straight up to the library. Having a signed permission slip from a head of house didn't mean he could just browse the restricted section at will. The slip specified exactly what materials he needed, and he was only allowed to borrow the titles written on the parchment. He handed Snape's permission slip to Madame Pants. The strict librarian inspected the signature closely before silently leading Damien to the restricted section at the back of the library. The heavy, chained bookshelves here were arranged strictly by danger level, and within each danger level, they were further categorized by subject. It didn't take long for Madame Pants to locate the Slytherin manuscript Damien had requested. She handed him a heavy, leather-bound book. The gold leaf cover read, Slytherin's Secrets, a collection of ancient runes manuscripts. Clearly, this wasn't the original raw text, but rather a revised, compiled edition made by later scholars. "Thank you," Damien murmured. He took the heavy tome and found an isolated seat in the library's public study room to begin reading. Unfortunately, Slytherin's compiled manuscripts had very little description of actual meditation and made absolutely no mention of the specific Iman's basic meditation method he had found in the other world. However, after flipping through the brittle pages for a while, Damien finally found the exact phrase, "Meditation is the key to runic scripture." It was located in a chapter titled Tracing the Origin of Runic Script Pronunciation. The book stated that when Salazar Slytherin was researching the origins of runic magic, he discovered that the earliest known literature recording runic scripts dated back to the 7th century. At the very end of the chapter, the text recorded a brief conversation between Salazar Slytherin and one of his most famous students. "I asked Merlin how runic script could be seamlessly integrated into modern spell casting. Merlin replied to me, 'Meditation is the key to runic scripture.'" Damien frowned, his mind racing. Interestingly, Merlin, arguably the most famous wizard in history, was among the very first batch of students to ever attend Hogwarts, personally sorted into Slytherin House. According to magical historians, Merlin was active during the Middle Ages. His achievements were legendary. He established the Order of Merlin and championed the regulations prohibiting the use of magic against Muggles. The common wizarding expletive, Merlin's beard, referred directly to this man. However, this created a massive historical paradox. In the Muggle world, the legends of King Arthur and his advisor Merlin first appeared in Welsh bardic poetry around the year 600 AD. Historians generally agreed that the actual historical period of King Arthur and the ancient Merlin was around the late 5th century. Yet Hogwarts wasn't founded until the late 10th century. The active periods of the Muggle legends Merlin and the Hogwarts student Merlin were separated by nearly 500 years. Because of this massive gap, the general consensus in the wizarding world was that the two Merlins were entirely different people who just happened to share the same name. Merlin said this. Damien muttered to himself, completely baffled. According to Hogwarts, a history, the wizard Merlin's magical power grew at a terrifying, unprecedented rate after he enrolled. In his later years, Salazar Slytherin and Merlin shared a relationship that blended mentorship with deep friendship. However, after Merlin graduated, their drastically different views on Muggle relations caused a massive rift between them, and the two legendary wizards eventually went their separate ways. A sharp knock on the study room door broke Damien's concentration. Madame Pants stood in the doorway, her face severe. "It is time for the library to close, Mr. Black." Damien sighed and packed up the heavy book. He needed to head back to the Slytherin common room to process this new information. Hogwarts curfew was notoriously strict, and he had a lot to think about. 75 stones, unlock 1 bonus chapter. 150 stones, unlock 2 bonus chapters. 300 stones, unlock 3 bonus chapters. Chapter 20, The Dual World Slytherin 20. Damien had been pressed into service. On his way back to the Slytherin common room, he had the misfortune of running into Professor Snape. There had been several minor accidents during the first-year potions and flying classes that day. Because the hospital wing's supply was running low, Madame Pomfrey had entrusted Snape with brewing a fresh batch of restorative potions. Unlucky Damien just happened to cross paths with his head of house on the way to the dungeons. Snape immediately conscripted him as an extra pair of free hands. Damien and Professor Snape worked in absolute silence until 10 o'clock at night, finally finishing the massive batch of potions Madame Pomfrey needed. There was a distinct hint of exhaustion on Professor Snape's face. The workload of a Hogwarts staff member was notoriously heavy, and since potions was a core subject, Snape's teaching schedule was completely booked. As they finished cleaning the cauldrons, Snape picked up a piece of manuscript paper from his desk and held it out. An improved invigoration draft. It is slightly more effective than the standard recipe you've been using. Thank you, Professor, Damien said, happily taking the parchment. He hadn't even noticed Snape writing it. He had briefly asked Snape for advice on improving the potion while they were working earlier, but the professor had simply told him to shut up and focus on his stirring. Damien, Snape drawled as he turned away. For assisting a professor and lightening my burden, 10 points to Slytherin. Snape truly never let a single opportunity to award points to his own house slip by. Don't worry, we'll find Trevor, Harry said, awkwardly trying to comfort Neville. Neville's toad was lost again. Trevor had been sitting right beside him when they went to the Great Hall for dinner, but the amphibian had vanished by the time they finished eating. My Scabbers is very well behaved. He never gets lost, Ron boasted, reaching into his pocket to stroke the sleeping rat. Neville looked even more dejected. My memory is just too poor. I'm always losing things. Hermione glared sharply at Ron, silently signaling him to shut up. Suddenly, her eyes lit up. Why don't we go find Damien? Maybe Knox has a way to track Trevor down. Ron looked surprised. You guys know Damien too? It was Knox who found Trevor on the Hogwarts Express, Hermione explained. We shared a compartment with Damien. Do you know him? Ron nodded eagerly. We're practically neighbors. The Blacks live quite close to Ottery St. Catchpole, where my family lives. He grinned. Have you guys ever played flying chess? Damien gave me a set for Christmas last year. I heard he bought it from Muggles, but it's brilliant. As a distant relative of the Weasley family, Damien was frequently invited to the Burrow to celebrate the holidays. Ron was about to launch into a detailed explanation of flying chess rules, but he suddenly noticed that Harry, Hermione, and Neville had all gone completely pale. They were staring in absolute terror at something right behind him. It is currently past curfew. The cold, silky voice sent a shiver down Ron's spine. The 4 Gryffindors had the terrible misfortune of running into Professor Snape, who was just returning from delivering his potions to the hospital wing with Damien trailing right behind him. Damien watched the scene unfold with mild amusement. Ron turned his head stiffly and came face to face with Snape's emotionless glare. I'm completely done for, Ron panicked internally. He had been caught breaking curfew by the most terrifying teacher in the school on the very first day. A strained smile, which looked closer to a grimace of pain, appeared on Ron's face. Professor. Snape stared down his hooked nose at the 4 trembling first years. Foolish souls always seem to flock together, he said slowly. 10 points from Gryffindor. Harry instinctively tried to defend them. Neville's toad is lost, sir. We were just helping him find it. Snape's dark eyes snapped to Harry, his expression turning icy. Potter. For talking back to a teacher, another 10 points from Gryffindor. Snape then turned his glare on Neville. Find your toad and return to your dormitory immediately. If I catch you wandering the corridors at night again, you will all be serving detention. Without another word, Snape turned and swept away down the corridor. Viewed from behind, his billowing black robes looked like a rolling mass of dark smoke. Harry's mood plummeted. He simply didn't understand why Professor Snape was always targeting him. Damien stepped forward, offering a sympathetic smile. Professor Snape didn't give you detention. Losing a few house points is no big deal. Just study hard and earn them back during class. Ron looked at Damien with a bizarre expression. Earning points from teachers wasn't exactly easy. How could Damien say it so lightly? Hermione quickly changed the subject. Damien, could you ask Knox to help find Neville's toad? No problem, Damien said gently. Knox knows a lot of the local cats here at Hogwarts. Because they were magical pets, the cats in the wizarding world were highly intelligent and had their own complex social circles within the castle. Damien drew his wand. Oxio pet. The tip of his wand emitted a faint, continuous silver glow. This is a modified summoning charm specifically for magical pets. As long as you maintain the magic, the pet will be able to perceive its owner's location and come to you, Damien explained. He looked at the round-faced boy. Neville, you should probably learn this spell. Neville's eyes widened in surprise. There's magic for that? I definitely want to learn it. But his excitement faded instantly. He remembered how difficult it was for him to even cast a basic Lumos. But I'm afraid I won't be able to learn it. I'm not very good. It's okay, the wand movement is very simple, Damien reassured him, seeing the expectant looks on the Gryffindors' faces. I can teach all of you when I have some free time. The 4 first years nodded repeatedly, looking delighted. At that exact moment, a sleek black Kneazle hopped gracefully through an open corridor window. Knox padded slowly over to Damien's feet and affectionately rubbed his arched back against Damien's robes. Damien scooped the cat up and scratched the thick fur behind his ears. Knox, Neville's toad is lost again. Can you help him out? Knox rolled his glowing yellow eyes. He was a cat, not a bloodhound. Why was he always expected to do the heavy lifting when it came to finding lost things? Other pets just had to lie in their owners' laps and act cute to get premium treats. Meanwhile, Knox was being forced to work overtime, late at night, right after he had finished a lovely evening date with Mrs. Norris. With an annoyed huff, Knox jumped out of Damien's arms and padded confidently toward the dark depths of the corridor. Damien turned to the 4 Gryffindors. Just follow Knox. He'll track the toad down for you. I have some other things I need to take care of, so I'm heading off. Damien was eager to practice his meditation, so he didn't want to waste time hunting for an amphibian. After saying goodbye to the Golden Trio, Damien didn't return to the Slytherin dungeons. Instead, he slipped away and climbed the moving staircases all the way up to the 8th floor. He stopped in front of the blank stretch of wall opposite the tapestry of Barnabas the Barmy. He closed his eyes and concentrated, thinking clearly, I need a secure room where I can brew potions. He paced past the wall 3 times. When he opened his eyes, a smooth, polished wooden door had materialized in the stone. The room of requirement was not overly large, but it was absolutely perfect. It was fully equipped with high-end, brass potion brewing equipment, an array of rare ingredients, and even a small cot for resting. Damien pulled out the manuscript paper Snape had given him. It detailed the exact recipe for the improved invigoration draft. After reading the instructions through once to memorize them, he immediately started brewing. The ingredients required for this improved recipe were all fairly common, and he had plenty stored in his magically expanded pocket. After 30 minutes of careful stirring and precise temperature control, he successfully brewed his first batch of the modified potion. However, his technique was still a bit rusty with the new recipe, leaving too many impurities floating in the liquid. He unceremoniously dumped the poor quality draft down the drain, summarized his mistakes, and immediately started brewing a second batch. This will do, Damien muttered a short while later. The shimmering, pale gold liquid in his cauldron had perfectly matched Snape's rigorous standards. Damien poured a vial and drank it down. The spicy, burning sensation echoed down his esophagus. A few breaths later, the recovery speed of his sea of spirit spiked dramatically. He closed his eyes, carefully feeling the internal condition of his mind. The recovery speed of his sea of spirit had increased by exactly 30%. The original invigoration draft he bought at the apothecary only increased his recovery speed by 20%. Thrilled by the result, he quickly brewed 4 more bottles of the improved draft. After chugging them all, the stacked recovery speed of his Sea of Spirit reached an astonishing 250%. Professor Snape's ability to casually improve established potions was nothing short of miraculous. Damien couldn't help but marvel at the man's sheer genius. Even with his system and vast knowledge, Damien's own foundational understanding of potion theory wasn't deep enough to invent improvements like this yet. With his mental recovery completely maxed out, Damien sat cross-legged on the cot and began to practice Iman's basic meditation method in the absolute silence of the room of requirement. He did some quick mental calculations. At this massively accelerated speed, he would easily be able to advance to a second-level wizard apprentice in just 3 or 4 days. 75 stones, unlock 1 bonus chapter. 150 stones, unlock 2 bonus chapters. 300 stones, unlock 3 bonus chapters. Chapter 21, The Dual World Slytherin 21. A few days later, inside the room of requirement, Damien had just condensed another runic model within his Sea of Spirit. A glint of joy flashed in his eyes. By now, exactly 128 runic models were drifting steadily inside his mind. Thanks to his recent hard work and a steady supply of potions, he had finally met the threshold for a breakthrough. He could advance to a second-level wizard apprentice at any moment. Damien retrieved a vial of Mundu extract from his magically expanded pouch, smearing the shimmering liquid evenly across his forehead. This time, he used triple the amount he normally applied during practice. Taking a deep breath, he drank the remaining half-cup of the extract in one go. A violent, icy sting instantly flooded his tongue. Moments later, it went completely numb, as if frozen solid. The chill, carried by the potent magic of the potion, shot straight to the top of his skull and made his scalp tingle. Damien's brows knitted tightly together. It felt as if he had swallowed a bucket of menthol bomb spiked with mothballs. Forcing through the discomfort, he reined in his mind and began circulating his meditation method. A few breaths later, the extract smeared on his forehead began seeping deep into his skin. Damien felt as though he were standing in a small boat adrift on a raging sea, battered by a fierce storm. Towering waves slammed into the hull, threatening to capsize him at any instant. Endless breakers seemed to crash over him. Each impact consumed a part of his Sea of Spirit, yet after every surge, the sea grew denser and more refined. After nearly an hour, Damien was completely drenched in sweat, his complexion ghastly pale. Only a sliver of mental power remained within his Sea of Spirit, he was nearly exhausted. Just as the last trace of his spirit was spent, his Sea of Spirit shuddered violently. The distinct sound of shattering glass rang in his ears. He sensed a hidden shackle break. His Sea of Spirit expanded rapidly, halting only when it reached 1.5 times its original size. Immediately, the magic inside him began to boil. Objects scattered around the room of requirement rose into the air, caught by an unseen, powerful force. Moments later, the surging magic finally calmed, and the floating items clattered harmlessly back to the floor. He quickly checked his internal reserves. His total magical power had increased by a staggering 20%. He now possessed more raw magic than an average, fully qualified wizard. Damien felt better than ever. It was as though he had experienced a controlled burst of accidental magic. In the wizarding world, young witches and wizards underwent sudden awakenings of power through accidental magic, during which a child's magical reserves skyrocketed. Afterward, their magic only grew gradually with age and practice. Because of this, childhood accidental magic largely set the upper limit of a wizard's natural potential. Wild with joy, Damien did some quick mental calculations. If every breakthrough brought a miniature surge like this, by the time he graduated, he would have larger reserves than a veteran auror. Raw power had always been his weak point. After all, he was only a young teenager, and his reserves were naturally thin. His current strength relied entirely on uncanny casting speed and his rich combat experience. Once this weakness was mended, his staying power in a duel would soar. Calming his elation, he drew his wand to tidy the mess his magical surge had caused. He visited this room daily. It gave him a secure place to brew potions and a quiet spot for his meditation practice. It was incredibly convenient. Damien left the room of requirement near midnight. The castle corridors were completely hushed, with very few rule-breaking students daring to wander out so late. He drew his wand and tapped it lightly against his palm twice, casting a silent, modified signaling charm. This was the signal he and Nox had agreed upon. Casting the charm twice inside the castle would tell the Niazel to wait outside the Slytherin common room, since Nox couldn't pass through the hidden stone wall alone. As he reached the damp dungeon entrance, a sleek black Niazel sprinted toward him from the far end of the corridor. Meow. Nox leapt gracefully into Damien's arms, affectionately rubbing his head against the boy's hand. Nox was an incredibly affectionate companion. In Damien's 2 lifetimes of experience, pets had wildly different temperaments, and the ones that loved to cajole naturally won the most favor. Carrying the Niazel, he entered the Slytherin common room. It was completely empty at this hour, so he dropped exhaustedly onto one of the dark leather sofas. He scratched Nox under the chin. The feline narrowed his glowing yellow eyes in absolute bliss, purring deeply. This was a major perk of having Niazel blood, no shedding. If Nox were a normal muggle cat, Damien's black robes would already be covered in fur. Damien mentally reviewed the information he had gathered over the past few days. He had combed through the library's materials on Salazar Slytherin and the era of Merlin. Yet, he had found scarcely any mention of meditation, let alone a complete meditation method. He grew ever more puzzled. Why did this world possess ancient runes yet lack a matching spell-casting system for them? The runic script seemed to have appeared out of nowhere during the Middle Ages. Then, a brilliant thought struck him. Why not just ask Merlin himself? A portrait of the legendary wizard still hung right here in Hogwarts. In fact, the Slytherin common room housed an entire gallery of famous, historical Slytherin alumni. Cradling Nox, he rose from the sofa and entered the quiet study room to the right of the main gathering area. In the grand portrait, Merlin's grizzled hair merged seamlessly with his thick, white beard. He was reclining on a painted wooden bench, apparently dozing off. Damien stepped up to the painting and spoke softly. "Lord Merlin." The painted Merlin opened his eyes slowly and gave a wide stretch. "Up so late, are we? Come to chatter with an old man?" Merlin asked, his voice echoing slightly in the frame. "You may call me Professor. When Hogwarts was first founded, we were quite short on staff. After my graduation, I actually taught here for a few years." Damien immediately obliged. "Professor Merlin, I'd like to ask you something." He carefully organized his thoughts. "On a manuscript written by your teacher, Salazar Slytherin, I read a specific line: meditation is the key to ancient runes. Yet, in other historical sources from the same period, I find almost no mention of meditation. What, exactly, does this meditation refer to?" Merlin studied Damien with deep, ancient eyes. It felt as if the portrait could see right through him in an instant. A sharp light flashed in the old wizard's gaze. Suddenly, a thick, magical mist rolled over the canvases of every other portrait in the room, obscuring them completely. Slowly, Merlin spoke. "Don't you already know the answer to that?" he asked quietly. "I can see the lingering traces of a meditation method on you right now. 75 stones, unlock 1 bonus chapter. 150 stones, unlock 2 bonus chapters. 300 stones, unlock 3 bonus chapters." Chapter 22, The Dual World Slytherin 22. Professor Merlin could actually tell that Damien had practiced the meditation method. And this was despite him being nothing more than a magical portrait. Merlin clearly knew about the technique. So why hadn't it been passed down? Damien voiced his thoughts. Professor Merlin, why was the meditation method lost to time? The method circulated freely between 400 AD and 600 AD, Merlin explained. But beginning in the 6th century, it mysteriously vanished almost overnight. After that, the practice could not be recorded or described in any way. Even related memories, when extracted using memory magic, would be completely erased by some mysterious force. As time passed, the number of wizards who had mastered the technique dwindled until it was lost entirely. A flicker of genuine confusion flashed in Merlin's painted eyes. I am exceedingly curious as to how you learned it in this era. Damien's heart churned in turmoil. He hesitated, unsure of how to explain. He absolutely could not expose his secret of traveling to other worlds. Fortunately, Merlin noticed his reluctance and smiled understandingly. Everyone is entitled to their own secrets. However, the situation today seems a bit different, the ancient wizard continued. This level of communication between us would have been completely impossible in the past. It appears that the mysterious force suppressing the meditation method has disappeared. The change must have occurred within the last 100 years or so. 2 centuries ago, a scholar studying ancient runes was also curious about my teacher's manuscript. He asked me the meaning of meditation, but at the time, my portrait was physically incapable of discussing it with him. Damien was stunned. Even a portrait's conversation was interfered with? He couldn't fathom what kind of immense power could achieve such a thing. Was it the power of magic? In the 6th century, every wizard who had mastered the method attempted to find the source of this suppression, Merlin said. But until the practice was lost completely, no one could uncover the truth. As for whether it was magic, Merlin paused thoughtfully. I believe it was. Can magic really achieve that level of control? Damien was dazed. A large-scale influence lasting for over 1,000 years, only ceasing within the last century, it was terrifying. He suddenly remembered the taboo curse placed on Voldemort's name during the Wizarding War. As long as someone spoke the Dark Lord's moniker, his followers could instantly sense their location. Perhaps this mysterious force was a similar, but vastly more powerful, curse. But the taboo only tracked locations. It wasn't even close to the same level as a conceptual force that could actively interfere with reality and erase memories. Then how was that phrase meditation is the key to ancient runes left behind in the manuscript? Damien asked. The text said it was a record of a conversation between Salazar Slytherin and yourself. Doesn't that count as discussing the method? According to what you just said, shouldn't that record have been erased? I only spoke that single sentence, and my teacher did not learn the actual mechanics of the method from it, Merlin replied, his tone lowering. The mysterious force was absolute, but it was not entirely rigid. Vague mentions could sometimes slip through. Damien suddenly realized a discrepancy. The Merlin standing before him should have been active between the 10th and 12th centuries. If the interference started in the 6th century, how did he know so much about it? Damien voiced his inner doubt. You were Salazar Slytherin's student, which places you hundreds of years after the 6th century. How do you know all these historical details? Merlin smiled slightly. I once explored the deepest secrets of time. I learned these truths by gazing directly into the currents of history. Damien was astonished. Merlin could actually perceive history from centuries before his own birth. The modern wizarding world possessed tools for time travel time turners, but their maximum safe limit was only 5 hours. Exceeding that window caused catastrophic consequences. I can sense a unique rhythm of time upon you, Merlin said softly. If you wish to truly explore the mysteries of history, I can invoke this temporal power within you and send you to the past. My portrait does not possess the specific memories of the meditation method, but perhaps you could obtain it from the living, past version of me. Damien frowned in confusion. He had time-related magic on him? Then it hit him. Every time he traveled between worlds via his mysterious disc, he always returned to the exact moment he had left. Perhaps this was the temporal power Merlin was sensing. Aside from his dimensional travels, Damien couldn't think of anything else. The prospect of traveling to the past was incredibly tempting. If he succeeded, he might secure a complete, flawless meditation method. Is there any danger in returning to the past? Damien asked cautiously. Exploring the mysteries of time is exceptionally dangerous, Merlin warned. Therefore, you must first pass a preliminary trial. Only then will I help you travel back 1,000 years. The portrait leaned forward. I will send you to the year 1943. My teacher raised a basilisk within the Chamber of Secrets deep beneath this castle. He did not take the beast with him when he left Hogwarts. A basilisk's lifespan is incredibly long, and a millennium later, it still slumbers there. In 1943, a student opened the chamber, resulting in a tragic death. I need you to go back to that year and slay the basilisk. Damien's heart pounded. He knew perfectly well who had opened the Chamber of Secrets in 1943. It was Lord Voldemort, who was still attending Hogwarts at the time under his given name, Tom Marvolo Riddle. With his current magical reserves and combat experience, Damien felt reasonably confident he could handle the basilisk. He nodded firmly. How do I return once the beast is dead? There is a secret passage within the chamber that leads directly to the Forbidden Forest, Merlin explained. After slaying the basilisk, use that passage to leave the chamber unnoticed, then return to this exact room. From here, I will pull you back to your proper time. Merlin's expression then turned deadly serious. When you arrive in the past, a layer of temporal magic will protect you. You absolutely must return to this room before that power is exhausted. If you fail, you will be permanently stranded in a splintered, parallel timeline. You will never be able to return to your own present. The ancient wizard continued to emphasize the rules. This temporal magic will also conceal your tracks. As long as you merely observe, you will remain undetected. But the moment you take action and interfere with past events, the concealment will drop. Furthermore, you must not let anyone who lives to see your current timeline lay eyes upon you. Doing so will cause a massive, rapid drain on your temporal protection. Damien understood immediately. It was the standard rule of time travel: minimize interference. He had to avoid interacting with anyone who was still alive in the present, especially powerhouses like Albus Dumbledore or Tom Riddle. But wait, Damien asked, a frown creasing his face. Wouldn't killing the basilisk in 1943 be a massive interference with the current timeline? Merlin smiled slightly, a knowing glint in his eye. There is no basilisk in the Chamber of Secrets in your current timeline. Damien's pupils shrank sharply. A violent shock rippled through his heart. There was no basilisk in the present? Did that mean this was no longer the original canon timeline? Or was he locked in a predestination paradox, destined to be the one who goes back and kills it so that it isn't there in the future? What would happen if he just said no? A surge of rebellious defiance swelled in his chest. He couldn't help but ask the burning question. What if I simply choose not to go? What happens if I refuse to kill the basilisk right now? 75 stones, unlock 1 bonus chapter. 150 stones, unlock 2 bonus chapters. 300 stones, unlock 3 bonus chapters. New chapter is coming soon. Write a review.